Here.
Commissioner Lazowski.
Here.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Mobley.
Here.
Chairman Crosby.
Here. Okay, we had in our packet the minutes from our January 28th meeting. Any additions, corrections, notations that need to be made on those minutes? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the minutes for the meeting.
We have a quick one.
I'm sorry. It's minor, but you have me as a yes vote, and I arrived late at that meeting. I think I was not here when you voted on the minutes.
Oh, on the
Arrived
minutes?
at 7:19.
Yeah, I think they allowed you to vote, didn't they?
Well, it was on the minutes,
Oh.
he's saying.
Oh.
Just the approval of the minutes from October 29th.
Oh, got it.
Oh,
More than likely, we didn't wait till 7,
Yes,
9, 10.
that's true.
oh, gotcha. I got what you're saying. Yeah,
I
thank
think
you.
you guys could approve them and we could just modify
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you're comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
Minor correction.
Yep. So then we'll take a motion with the correction.
A motion to approve the minutes with that change?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of January 28, 2019 with the correction noted. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, carried. All right, let me get over back to the agenda. We have a very full agenda tonight, so hopefully we can keep focused and stay on track. But before we move on, we do give opportunity at each of our meetings for just general requests from the floor. If there's somebody in the audience here tonight that would like to speak to the Planning Commission on an issue that's not on tonight's agenda, now is the time to do it. And when you do, anybody gives testimony tonight, we'll have you come to the podium and state your name and your address for the record. So any non-agenda content for tonight for us? Okay. We go next to a presentation. Go right ahead.
I assume that's me.
Yes.
Right? Okay. I'm Michelle Poyourow. I'm a transit planner, and I have been hired by Sandy Transit and ODOT to update your transit master plan. Were any of you here last night at the city council meeting?
At the beginning, but not.
Okay. Great. Then this will leave contact. So my firm is called Garrett Walker & Associates. We are transit planners. All we do is transit planning. It's a very small firm. There are only 9 of us. We work all over the world, but we also work all over Oregon. So we recently done plans for Canby, which I think is actually a very good kind of peer city to Sandy. Also for Grants Pass and Eugene Lane Transit District. So we're excited about this transit plan update. I think there are two things that are happening that make it a particularly good opportunity for Sandy to check in again about what it wants out of its transit system. One is that the state has changed the funding that's available for transit and has changed to a certain degree the priorities for transit. And I think they're actually aligned more now with what Sandy Transit is already doing. So that's exciting. The other thing is that, of course, you are updating your land use and transportation plans, and that provides an opportunity to better align your land use and transportation with your goals for transit, whatever those goals may be. So that's the second thing is what I want to talk about tonight. And just to give you some big context, we're about to get public input, the first phase of public input on this plan. We're asking people general questions this spring. We will be producing a draft plan in the fall. So that way people can actually read a draft plan and respond in a more detailed way to what's in the draft plan, and then have fun plan by year.
Okay. Just is the microphone not working, you guys?
She needs to be by her
Oh, she needs to be by that. Okay, got it. Oh, you've got a microphone.
It doesn't work internally anyways.
Oh,
It
okay.
only works for people watching on YouTube.
No, that's what I was concerned
Yeah,
about.
would she be at the
Actually.
podium or
YouTubers.
for the microphone or what?
It doesn't work
No.
internally.
It's
though.
okay as long as there's a speaker there. I didn't know
Will,
there
will it
was.
be heard on the TV?
You're fine. I
No,
just wanted to
leave
make
it
sure
there.
she's
If
getting
you're speaking, it will
recorded.
be heard on yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It picks up
Perfect.
everything in here.
Thanks.
Okay.
So, quick review of the Sandy the transit services on offer in Sandy. The red line you see is the Sandy Gresham Express. There's quite a bit of service going to Gresham every day of the week. actually every day of the year. The blue line is the Mount Hood Express. Also quite a bit of service going up the mountain, also every day of the year. That is not provided by Sandy, it's provided by Clackamas County. Those two lines make a timed connection in downtown, which is something kind of special. You don't have to worry about whether you're going to make your transfer between them. The bus drivers, it's time, their time to be there at the same time, they radio each other, they move passengers between the buses. The yellow lines, or no, I'll say the green line is the Estacada Express. So this is a weekday express to Estacada from Sandy. Doesn't run nearly as often as the Gresham line. And then those two yellow lines, well, a bunch of yellow lines, are the two shopper shuttles. Just this year, Sandy Transit divided what used to be one big shopper loop into two shopper loops so that people don't have to ride in quite as big of a circle to get to the grocery stores as they used to. And the circularness of those shopper shuttles will be relevant to a point I'm going to make later, so that's part of why I wanted to make sure that you see them. They're both one-way loops, so that means for a round trip, somebody gets on, you know, they might get a ride fairly directly to the Fred Meyer, but then to get back home, they actually ride all the way around, you know, they kind of do a tour of town to get back to where they started. Although again, less so than last year since they were split into two. Those shopper shuttles only run in the afternoon or early evening, and they each run once an hour. So not very frequent, just available in the afternoons, so, you know, people who don't work could use them to go shopping, and kids getting off of school, we can use them as well to move around town in the afternoons. All right, here's a different picture of Sandy Transit. I'm going to show you a graph of the ridership relative to operating costs on each of the Sandy Transit services over the last 10 years. So there's a lot of data on one graph here. That very top line is the Gresham Express. And as you can see, ridership, not just total ridership, but ridership relative to service level went down quite a bit between 2011 and 2014. This is the same thing that happened in Canby, and it happened for the same mix of reasons. The biggest one might be both agencies started charging a fare. And anytime you go from free to not free, you lose a whole bunch of customers. You can ask Ben and Jerry's about the difference between free code day and not free code days, right? And so that was part of it, but also the economy got better, which means fewer community college students riding. Interest rates were very, very low, which made it very easy for people to get cars, to actually purchase cars, to say nothing of fueling them and insuring them. And as the economy was picking up, more people had a job, or were financially able to purchase cars. So that's the Gresham Express, the red line. The green line is the Estacada Express. As you can see, similar kind of trend, lower overall ridership relative to operating costs. The other fixed route on here is the shopper shuttles, and they're in yellow. And you can see they were introduced, and then they've been growing in productivity ever since. I should find my chart, by the way. Productivity is transit speak for ridership relative to cost. Lay people might say efficiency. It means the same thing. So the shopper shuttles are doing better every year, which is great. I don't want the direction that line is pointing to give you the wrong impression. It's not going to shoot off the graph in a few years. Local circulators in towns this size tend to top out at about 10 boardings per hour. So I think it's very unlikely that your shopper shuttles are going to move more people relative to cost than your express, the Gresham Express. But it's a great service. It's getting better. It's getting more ridership as it becomes more popular. So those are the fixed routes. The blue line is the dial ride and paratransit. You know, and as you can see, it holds steady at, you know, just under 5 boardings per hour, 5 passengers per hour. The purple line is the very specialized elderly and disabled medical transport. That helps people go really long distances to medical appointments. Because they're going such long distances, it's very expensive per passenger, and that's why it's a small program, and why only people with really severe needs for those trips, for those medical trips, are served by that program. So the one point I want to make with this is ridership and productivity have both fallen in the last decade. But the other point I want to make is, as much as ridership fell on the Gresham Express, it is still moving way more people in total, and way more people relative to cost than all your other programs. So I don't want, just because ridership fell on, I don't want people to think like, well, that express didn't work, right? Or we have to try something different. Because if you care about ridership relative to cost, it is still your workhorse. It is still moving the most people within the community and in and out of the community compared to all the other tools in your tool basket. So, also, other agencies are experiencing the same thing. So this is a graph of Oregon and Washington peers, and I know the fonts are small, I apologize. But the brown line, the pink line, and the turquoise line are Yakima, Longview, and Canby, and they all kind of have the same thing happen, which is a big drop around the same time. And this is actually nationwide. There are special things going on in some small cities, but basically everyone's dealing with the same kind of economic dynamics. So it's not really about sale. So I'm not worried. I guess that's the Cliff's Notes version of that. So I've been talking about ridership. I've been talking about productivity, which is ridership relative to cost, which might make it sound like the only reason I think you run transit service is ridership, but that's not actually the case. There are non-ridership reasons to run transit service. You might have routes out there that are getting close to people so that if they become injured, or if they become too old to drive, or if their car's in the shop, they have something that protects them from isolation. But in practice, they're not going to use it very much most of the time, and so you don't get much ridership. Well, there's value in that. People value that. And we call that a coverage value. And because generally it arrives from covering an area, from having a route through an area, even if people don't ride it much. So you have ridership goals and coverage goals. If this were a choose your own adventure, we could now choose between talking about that more or talking about how you get high transit ridership. But it's not a choose your own adventure, so we're going to talk about higher transit ridership. I'm happy to come back and talk more about coverage goals later. So if you want high ridership, which is not a given, that's why the if is really big. If you want higher ridership, then you will follow the ridership recipe. And this is very much about land use, which is why I'm telling you about it. The ridership recipe is high all day, all week frequency, following patterns of density, walkability, linearity, and proximity. And I'll talk through each of those in turn. And the reason this is the ridership recipe is that this is how you get the most useful service close to the largest number of people, and you give them the most reasonable travel time. High all day, all week frequency following these land use patterns. And frequency is a really important part of it. Frequency matters to ridership for a couple of reasons. One is it's kind of a cubed benefit. You leave the house when you want to leave the house, or you arrive at your place when you want to arrive, not way too early because that's when the bus gets there. You are not completely out of luck if your bus doesn't show up, if your bus has a maintenance problem. The next bus isn't coming 2 hours from now, the next bus is coming half an hour from now, 15 minutes from now. So the consequences of a reliability problem are smaller. And then it allows you to make connections more easily. So your bus to Gresham comes every half hour. The MAX train to Gresham from Portland comes every 15 minutes. So when I was coming here yesterday, the maximum wait I would have to make that transfer was 30 minutes, and that's okay. And in fact, the average wait is 15. Because half the time, I'm there just before the Sand bus leaves, and half the time I'm not. And in practice, I waited 60 minutes, and that was fine. If your Gresham bus came only once an hour, well then my maximum wait would be 59 minutes, and that's a different deal. I might not have done it, I might have driven out. So frequency also allows multiple routes to work as a network, rather than as isolated services. And that's a really important thing about frequency. The other thing about frequency is it matters a great deal more when you talk about shorter trips. So I am willing to plan a trip around a route that comes every 30 minutes to come 20 miles, but not to go 1 mile down my own street. To go 1 mile down my own street, I might as well just start walking. And this is one of the tricky things about circulators, and this is one of the reasons I say with confidence that very few local circulator routes in towns like this will get more than 10 mornings an hour. There are a few, but not a lot. And the reason is just that you're competing with walking for a lot of those trips. And so people who are able-bodied or fit or confident will just start walking. So frequency really matters a great deal as you talk about smaller and smaller trips. And finally, frequency is relative. I think 30-minute frequency to Gresham is good frequency. But I wouldn't say that if I was thinking about a trip going a mile from my house down the street. So frequency is relative to distance. It's really hard to imagine what a low frequency, a poor frequency is like if you don't use transit very much. We don't have this experience very much in our life. But the sort of parallel I suggest for people is imagine a gate at the end of your driveway that only opens once an hour. If you want to plan a grocery shopping trip around something that comes once an hour, it's like you have to get ready, get your keys, get your bag, and stand by your car and wait for the gate to open. And if you miss the gate opening, you have to wait another 59 minutes. And this is what it's like to live your life on low frequency transit. And lots of people do. But this is why people who are in a hurry, whose time is really valuable, and that means low income people as well as high income people, will do what they can to not rely on low frequency transit because they don't have 59 minutes to spare. We also know that frequency matters because we just see it in the data. This is a graph of a scatter plot of every transit route at 25 mid-sized suburbanish US transit systems. And the x-axis is frequency, higher frequencies, shorter waits to the left. And the y-axis is productivity, ridership relative to cost. And there's this correlation that as routes get more frequent, they get not just higher ridership, but higher ridership relative to their cost. And of course, their cost is higher if they're more frequent. And this is partly about planners knowing where to put frequent service, but it's also about people responding powerfully to frequency. People find frequency liberating, and so they ride a little more when the frequency goes up. So back to land use. The land use drivers of ridership are density. I'll start with density. Density is a scary word, right? Density comes up a lot in arguments about parking and shadowing and traffic and noise and all that. But it's a very simple mathematical principle, and what it means in transit is how many people are going to and from the area around each stop. So in this respect, a community college is very dense because numerous people are going to and from community colleges all day. Low density residential housing, not very dense, right? Not very many people are coming and going. Industrial uses aren't very dense, even if they are producing a lot of economic value, because not that many people are employed on industrial sites, but a Fred Meyer is a very dense place with activity. Important thing to notice, since I mentioned Fred Meyer, is parking lots reduce density. Because if you have a bus stop, Fred Meyer is a real busy place, but if it's on the far side of a long, big parking lot, then that means that's fewer people within a circle around that bus stop who can actually walk to the bus stop. So density matters, first order matter for high ridership in transit. Second thing is walkability. How many of the people near the bus stop, as the crow flies, can actually get to the bus stop? And again, this is where things like parking lots, difficulty crossing the highway really matter a lot, as does street connectivity. In these two examples, those two circles may contain the same number of residential units, but the circle at bottom, because the streets don't go through, half of those units can't actually walk to the bus stop within a quarter mile. Whereas in the circle at the top, about 80% of those units can actually walk to the bus stop. So street connectivity matters, ability to cross highways to reach the bus on the other side matters a great deal. Linearity. Can transit run in straight lines to attract through riders? If you can connect major destinations by driving in a direct line, you'll attract a lot more riders. Both because the riders like it. Nobody likes being taken out of direction, but also because it's cheaper for the transit agency to run in a straight line. Mm-hmm. That line at the bottom is much longer than the line at the top, and in transit, distance is time and time is money. So having to go down cul-de-sacs, up to the tops of hills, to the back of a parking lot to get to the floor of a building and back out to the highway, all of that takes time, and that means the transit agency is spending money on a circuitous route rather than spending money on things like higher frequencies or longer spans. Proximity or continuity. Does transit have to cross long, low ridership gaps? And again, this is more about what it costs the transit agency to reach all your destinations than it is about the customer effect. The transit agency is going to spend twice as much serving those destinations at bottom as at top. And what that means in practice is that they will deliver less frequency. So for 3 miles, that bus can deliver 30-minute frequency. 6 miles, now that bus can deliver 60-minute frequency. And frequency matters, so you'll get fewer riders. So as a land use body, when you make decisions about where development is located, the farther it is from other development, the more Sandy Transit has to spend on distance and the less they can spend on frequency or later hours of service things that encourage ridership. We remade your zoning map, and we color-coded the uses, giving ourselves a visual scale from dark red through lavender to white that correlates with how much transit demand they tend to generate. So dense residential and commercial are in red and orange, and then as you get into less intensive uses, they fade away. So we did this to get a picture of how your zoning, how does your zoning, is your zoning linear and proximate, right? Those are two of the factors in the ridership recipe. I know you're working on density, I know you're working on walkability all over the place, but is your density organized in ways that are linear and proximate? Because that will really determine how much transit ridership is possible here. And I know that the zoning hasn't come true yet. I know a lot of this is, you know, not developed to the zoning code yet, and maybe there are times it won't be. But I want to point out that you have these little village, I think they're called village commercial zones, and those concern me, because even some of the language I see in your existing plans suggests that those are going to be transit-oriented places. But I can't design high ridership transit that gets to the places. I can design a circuitous, infrequent route. I can design a circuitous route that's a one-way loop, that's very infrequent, and it's not going to get much ridership. And so I don't think that's necessarily a problem as long as high ridership isn't the goal. If the goal is providing lifeline transit service near everyone so that it's there in case they need it, that's great, and I can design good service with that goal. But if the goal is high ridership, building out denser development that is not linear and not proximate will make it very challenging to get high ridership. So, like I said, I know that this hasn't come true yet, and I know that it may be substantially revised soon, but I wanted to point out you have some great, you have this great linear pattern along the highway, and the highway's got its challenges. Because you're on the way to so many places, you're going to benefit from transit service. Being on the way is really powerful. Not only does the Mount Hood Express come through here, but the Central Oregon Breeze comes through here because you're on the way. So you benefit from service to Bend because you're on the way, which means any development near the highway is also close to service to Bend. And it's the same thing when you're thinking about your local transit service. Anything important that you want to be transit-oriented, put it on the way to somewhere else, rather than at the edge or at the end of the road. So, that's everything I wanted to say to you at this phase. I would love to take questions if you have time for them. And I'm very happy to come back at later phases of the project. Our timeline, as I said, right now we're doing some public outreach. We have a stakeholder committee meeting on April 15th. If you know anyone who would like to be on the stakeholder committee, or if one or more of you would like to be on the stakeholder committee, we'd love to have you there. It's a daytime meeting, which a poll said that people wanted that most. April 15th, so do talk with me or Andy if you'd like to know more about that. We are going to ask City Council for guidance on some of the big choices in this plan before we write the plan. They confirmed they would like that yesterday. We're going to develop the plan over the summer, and then, as I said, we'll have a draft plan in the fall for your review and for the public's review. We'll finalize the plan by the end of the year. And that's everything I wanted to tell you tonight. Do you have any questions?
It's a great presentation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really nicely organized. Thank you.
Well, I got to rehearse last night with the City Council. You got the better.
Good. Any questions?
I guess one thought I had was, you said you were going to go back to the city council for guidance, and I'm wondering in terms of planning and, for this body to kind of oversee and help with the developments. I mean, that's what we're spending a lot of our time doing right now. I guess other than attending the stakeholder committee meeting, is there any other way that we will be involved?
I could certainly come, I would be happy to come back to another of your meetings in April or May as well.
Yeah.
If you're interested, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is that the city council looks to us for things that are planning related,
Yeah.
and transit's so intricate to it. I literally had someone today saying that traffic's getting too hard why are they letting all these developments go in? I can't get in and out of my driveway. So
Yeah.
I know that, I know that they're linked.
Yeah. Yeah, so it might actually make come to you before city council so that you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just make a comment that they'll hear. 'cause-
Yes, okay.
yeah.
We have a meeting on April 22nd. It'll probably be the next available time.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Who, in terms of like what meeting and how much time on the agenda,
Staff,
got it.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll talk.
all right?
I'll talk to Jerry too. We set an agenda before the meeting.
We'll have our people
Okay.
talk to your people.
Great, well, thank you,
Thank you
appreciate your
very
time
much.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey Jerry, before we go to the next item, can we introduce?
Yes, do that. I was gonna have you.
So tonight, filling in for Mr. Boothman is Spencer Parsons, who works at Barry Elsner and Hammond as well, and he can just say a word about his experience there.
Good evening. Yeah, sure. Spencer Parsons. I've been, I started with Barry and Elsner before Jack Hammond and David came on and the firm became Barry Elsner and Hammond. I worked there for about 3 years, and then I took a job at Columbia County, and when Paul Elsner was considering retiring, he came and got me back and brought me back. So I've known David for a long time, but I've never, even back then and in this latest stint, I never had the opportunity to come out to Sandy, so thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're normally pretty good with our attorneys.
That's what
We
David
try to
says.
be. All right. We'll move ahead next to our first public hearing of the evening, which we will open at 7:28. And this is file number 18-054, conditional use permit, Scenic Street Camp Academy conditional use. Call for any abstentions from the Planning Commission. Nothing, or any conflict of interest to state? Nothing? Any ex parte contact?
I was just checking to make sure you didn't work on this.
Oh.
not.
I know, we look for that label. You're all familiar with the location where we're talking about. Okay, I'll call for any challenges to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, or any challenge to any individual Planning Commissioner. All right, if you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comments should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request the continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. We'll begin with a staff report. Emily.
All right, as Gary mentioned, we're looking at a conditional use permit for the Scenic Street former hospice site. The proposal is for Camp Academy, which is a single school and dormitory facility. So just to get everybody in the room on the same page, it's highlighted there in red, the property there towards the north end of the downtown. Zooming in a little, this is currently how the site looks. So there's the main building there, and some parking out back and parking in front. Scenic Street is down there to the south, and then Fur Drive to the east. So the applicant's proposal is a conditional use permit to allow the snowboarding academy and dormitory facility. They're not proposing any changes to the site, with the exception of removing 2 parallel parking spaces out in front of the building, which would be removed to accommodate bus circulation. So this is the submitted site plan. You see the building there with the parking, and then parking out front, on the side, and in the back. This is a zoom in to the bus circulation plan, so you can see the circled are the 2 parking spaces to accommodate the bus accessing the site. And then you can see the road parking there to the south of the building. And I will just dive right into kind of the issues that staff has found in our recommendations. So, the first one is just really to address kind of some site maintenance issues. When we did a site visit, we noticed that kind of stairs were crumbling a little. There's a lot of overgrown vegetation. There's moss kind of growing on the sidewalk, and the mailbox is right in the middle of the sidewalk. So just kind of some site fixer-upper site type things. I think are just part of the site having been vacant for a while now. So submitting a traffic impact analysis, they submitted a traffic letter with the bus circulation plan, but doing more of an impact analysis. We were looking at 144 Olympic athletes and then 26 employees with high occupancy vehicles or buses that would be servicing the site. Our public works director wanted to see a revised bus circulation plan and detailing the drive aisle as one way, the front drive aisle. Showing a minimum of 26 usable parking spaces. This was kind of an interesting one to calculate parking because the students are not going to be allowed to drive. So we didn't want to factor in, typically we would look at a school and we would do a calculation based on the number of students, but with them not driving, it's mostly going to be employees and then the buses. So we're going to want information on kind of the plan for the bus or the high occupancy vehicle parking, and then as well as to make sure that the site will accommodate, it's kind of assuming here that typically we assume 1 space for 2 employees, but realistically probably most employees aren't going to be carpooling, they're going to be driving, hopefully taking transit, but who knows. And one thing we did notice is that most of the existing spots on the site are compact, so they're only about 16 feet or even less in some cases long. So one of our major recommendations really is to get at least some standard size spaces in there. We do have to acknowledge we get a lot of trucks driving around here and bigger vehicles, so we're recommending restriping the 14 parking spaces out front to be standard size spaces. We're also recommending there are 9 gravel spaces in the rear that do appear like they're being used as parking. Our code doesn't allow parking on gravel, so we're recommending that those get paved. They are standard size, or it's a much larger area, so that would be good as well. Introducing more impervious surface would require addressing stormwater. Could be done by using permeable asphalt, something as simple as that. There's also quite a large yard space back there, so I think it could accommodate a rain garden or something on site to deal with that. So the front where those 14 parking spaces are, they're currently about 16 feet, and then there's a wall at the front. By making those 18 feet a standard size, we weren't quite sure if that would provide a wide enough aisle. So one suggestion was removing the remaining 7 parallel parking spaces, just quite a tight fit, or potentially angling the spaces so they don't come out quite as far, and then just providing additional information to show that they can meet the minimum aisle width, have cars parked in those parallel spots, and have cars be able to access, pull in and out of potentially the angled parking. So we just kind of want more information on how that might work. I already mentioned meeting the bus and the high occupancy vehicle parking plan. We're also recommending additional native ground covering shrubs in the swale out front, and all pictures of some of these things afterwards. And then another public works comment was regrading the parking to drain to the swale or to install additional drains. And overall, we are recommending approval of the conditional use permit for the snowboarding academy and dormitory facility with the conditions that were recommended in the staff report. So I'm just going to show a couple pictures quickly, and then we can go into the applicant and discussion. So these are just the kind of front staircases. You can see they're sort of crumbling a little bit. There's a lot of moss growing on them. Just again, kind of a site fixer-upper thing. This shows the mailbox that we're requesting to be relocated, because technically we need at least a 4-foot wide free pedestrian zone on the sidewalk. It also shows there's, you know, quite a bit of moss kind of growing at that curve, so if people are coming from there, it become like a slipping hazard or something. Along the west side of the site, are a little washed out, but there's quite a bit of overgrown vegetation. That's also where there's a few parking spaces. So currently those spaces are being encroached on by the vegetation, so the cars would be kind of coming further out, which would narrow the drive aisle substantially. There's also some parking against the building. Again, these are all compact spaces. When we were out on the site, we figured at least the one farthest north, probably if a car or even a sedan is parked there, it might be difficult to navigate around it. So again, this is another reason why we're wanting those 9 spaces that are clearly being used as parking, I think, or have in the past, to be paved, to just allow a little bit more flexibility in case some of these need to be removed because they don't function. On the back here too, there's some parking shown on the existing site plan. On the right-hand side of here, when you're out, it seems like if a car is parked there, it would be very, very tight for something else to navigate around the drive aisle there. So again, a lot of the existing spaces are just very small compared to our standard parking. This is the gravel area out back. You can kind of see the tire tracks in it, but they are much larger spots and would pretty easily accommodate typical vehicles. We just can't allow vehicle parking on gravel, so technically it needed to be paved. It's going to be counting as parking. And then here out front again, so again, the spots to the right or to the left there in front of the building are only 16 feet. We're recommending maybe standard size at 18 feet long. That reduces the aisle a bit. You can see the parallel parking on the right. 2 of those would be removed for the bus, but potentially needing to remove the other ones. That would also kind of decrease the parking up front. And we are recommending that that's the swale there that the trees are in, that we have additional like native shrubs and ground cover there to add a little bit of a buffer between the parking area and the sidewalk. So we just want more information on whether if these spots can be increased to the standard size and the drive aisle minimum can still be accommodated, and whether they need to be angled or not. So that is our staff report.
Okay.
You guys did receive a couple public comments as well, so if you have questions about those, I would recommend that staff would address that after we hear other testimony from people.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions for staff right now?
No.
Just to check on one thing, there was some discussion on the number of students. The original application said 80, and then we got to 144. Can you just clarify how we got from one to the other?
144. So that's the information we're going on.
I mean, again, where is the 144? I've glanced through the whole thing. I haven't found it yet. Maybe I just don't look in the right spot.
All I could find was modify existing conditional use from former Mount Hood hospitals to schools, and maybe 144 is in the hospice conditional use permit. I didn't see that number anywhere in the.
It's in the narrative that they submitted. I'm not sure what exhibit that is by B.
Well, my understanding was in Exhibit D, or C. I looked at Exhibit C, and it doesn't have any.
But nobody's reviewing. 144 is the number we're kind of working on.
We could just ask the applicant.
Yeah, they can
Yep.
operate on that.
I think that'd be the simplest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty big building.
Okay. With that, we'll go to applicant presentation. Yep. Give us your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Kevin English. Address 59550 East Highway 26 in Sandy. I'm a co-owner and CEO of Camp Academy, and I appreciate you hearing it out tonight. It's my first time in front of the council here, so thank you, commissioners. We are Camp, and Camp Academy oftentimes used synonymously. We operate High Cascade Snowboard Camp, Windell's Camp, and Y East Mountain Academy. The snowboard camp and ski camp, as many of you may know, have operated up here for the past 30 years. I've been involved with the business for 20 years. We've done about 30 years in government camp, where primarily our business was based around renting properties and being a good neighbor. Our entire business model was on taking care of the properties, taking care of the landlords, taking care of the neighbors. So I had read through obviously some of the concerns here, so just wanted to get some of these things up and out front here. About us, with our academy, and that's what this program is here. This is really these elite athletes who are driven to be in the Olympics, have that Olympic dream. The athletes specifically that'll first be in this group for the next 4 years really are funded by the Chinese government. We're running a really good development program for them. We have arguably the best coaches in the world right now who've all relocated, moved to Sandy. We have 18 of them who've moved here, purchased residences, in process of doing so. So our goal as an academy in this whole area is to, at our campus 10 miles up the hill, have the best snow training facility in the world. You all know how special Mount Hood is and how unique that is with the summertime snow, and to have the best coach program in the world. So how does that relate to this project? Well, this is a very highly structured program that we're putting in here, as opposed to the camps. Now, if any of you are familiar with the camps, over the past 30 years, there's been a lot of evolution in those camps, and that is primarily recreation-based campers coming out to have a good time. Maybe they want to go do something with it, maybe they don't. This program is totally different. Every hour of these athletes' lives are structured. So we have not just the 18 coaches, there's an additional 35 staff currently that is getting knocked down who are from China here just to support these people. So addressing one of the concerns that I'd heard was on the transportation in that community, and one of the recommendations I read was to keep the traffic on Meinig and Scenic, as Meinig's a collector. Those aren't problems at all. Those, to me, we look at whether it's required by the commission or not, we're a neighbor to come up and ask us to do such a thing. To me, that's just being a good neighbor operating within the community. So when we first located this property, I looked at it from a neighbor's standpoint. This building, built over 50 years ago, I'm sure some of you in this room know the exact year that it was built. I'm guessing most people in that neighborhood also have not ever seen that building being fully utilized for its original design intent. So then I'm thinking, if I lived in this neighborhood, it'd be quite a shock going from, you know, maybe 8 to 10 people using that massive building as an office space for the last 15, 20 years. We all know it has quite a history there. So all of a sudden becoming a fully utilized structure. I understand that. So my testimony here today isn't to assure the neighbors or the commission here that there's going to be zero impact on that neighborhood. When you're bringing people in there, anybody, I put in 2 new houses in there, there's going to be an impact there in terms of what it is. Now, what we can promise is that it's a highly structured program, and I can detail a little bit more about what the use of that is. We're very fortunate that we have a 28-acre campus up the hill where we do all of our training off-site. That's the trampolines and the airbags, all the skateboarding, all of that noisy stuff. So one of the concerns was, are they going to put skateboard ramps out back? Like, hey, that's a great idea. No. This place for these athletes for the next 4 years, and I guess we're at 3 years now, until Beijing 2022. That's the next Winter Olympics. Same athletes. They're using this as their residence. This is where these athletes go to get rest and respite. This is not a big hangout scene there. It's a highly structured program with high expectations placed upon these athletes, not just by us, but by their own government. This is a big deal. One question I saw as well was what's going to happen on Sundays. I don't believe we addressed that, and I apologize for not addressing that in the original application. Sundays is a day of rest for them. This is the day they do laundry. This is the day they're going to FaceTime with families. This may also be a day that we bring them in our buses up to campus and do additional training, or bring them out and do shopping. Let's show them a little bit of Oregon. So that's kind of what Sundays look like. I kind of wrote down some of the issues here that I wanted to address. Traffic analysis study, that's not an issue. We'll re-review all of that. Make sure that obviously all the parking spaces are adequate. If we need to do one-way directionals in that parking lot, not a problem. I think those were kind of the main issues that I wanted to present and clarify. I think when I saw it presented as it's the snowboarders, I think there's a negative connotation with that too, and I even imagine, I've snowboarded my whole life, I imagine guys with saggy pants kind of walking around, hanging out, kind of up to no good. That is not this program. This is Olympic level skiers and snowboarders who have one goal in mind. And unfortunately, it's not for the United States, it's for China, but we can deliver for them to get to the Olympics and get golds. So it's not a social plan. So I don't know if you guys have any questions of me. I don't know how you'd like to operate this, but I'm definitely open to questions from an operationals standpoint.
Do you have anybody else to give any presentation for the applicant, or just you?
No, I'm not here by myself. We have our planner is here as well,
okay.
And an architect.
Okay.
If further questions.
So just
Blaine,
so we know who's here.
Yeah, I had one thing I'd like to.
Okay, so.
Okay, why don't you come on up and
Okay.
do that so we hear as much as possible all at
Thank you.
once.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Blaine Scalhebe. I'm an architect and planner with Keystone Architecture. My address is 12020 Southeast Idleman Road, Portland, Oregon, 97086. I would like to address the traffic study, traffic analysis, and one of the requirements of the 9 paved parking stalls. You saw the gravel in the backside there. I'd like to modify the language so that after the traffic study is complete, we provide that the minimum required stalls, which is 26. Instead of making the 9 paved parking stalls mandatory, we'll pave those if needed. If that makes sense. Next thing is, we submitted additional information. This answers the question about the 144, and I'm not sure, and I remember seeing this document we submitted.
Yeah,
Okay, so
that's probably where it was.
yes, that was in this document here. So most of this document made it into Emily's report, but maybe a couple of figures maybe didn't make it, but it's in that document.
Any questions, or we can go? Just one curiosity question: what's the ages of these kids, athletes?
They're generally that 13 to 19 years old.
So I'd like to just clarify where we are in terms of, what's needed kind of on the traffic study. Appendix D does have a letter. But though they didn't show a big analysis, they just went through and made a comment that the weekday trips are 5.31 and the weekend, 3.82, and so there is some trip numbers there. Emily, what additional are we looking for? We're talking about a traffic analysis study. This is called a traffic analysis letter. So are we looking for, like we normally see, or what? What are we looking for here? Because I know it's also in your.
I think that was a public works comment, so I think there's just a standard list of things that need to be analyzed. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, a traffic letter can be done by anybody. All you have to do is look up the ITE numbers and determine the use and determine the number of trips, average daily, AM peak, AM PM peaks. Todd can speak to this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have some ideas about why.
I was thinking, why am I answering this?
So have you run, has this been run by, our city's consulting traffic person?
Yeah, let's let Todd speak to that, but I think he'd be the best one to answer that question.
I did have some questions for the applicant, just about the operation of the facility, because reading the narrative, it sounds like many months of the year, most of the time, there won't be very many people there, if I'm reading that correctly. And in the summertime, they probably will be, but most days they'll probably be up on the hill. Is that accurate? Can you give me kind of a description of how that program works?
12 months a year.
It is, yeah, I can speak to the flow of the year though, if you'd like.
I think it's best. It gets it on the recorder, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So the general flow of the year is, as you said, we noted throughout the year that they're here primarily for those summer months when this is the best place in the world to train. The rest of the year, they may be traveling down to New Zealand, chasing the snow, and then they're chasing what's called fist points. Those are the points that you accumulate to get to the Olympics, and those events are spread throughout Europe, Asia, North America, so there will be a lot of travel involved with that. Now, we said it's 144. That was kind of the peak. To give you an idea where the program is at today, we have 70 in the program right now, with potentially some more coming back in as we, continually culling the team. So that's kind of their annual flow. If we do have 144 on site, that's 3 buses. And to get into, I guess, what a daily flow looks like, after breakfast, it's essentially 3 buses picking them up, going to Timberline or Mount Hood Meadows, coming back to our campus and training till 3, 4, 5, 3 more buses going back there and dropping them. One point I did not note was the staff who are staying there. The 18 coaches that we employ locally, they work with the athletes on snow, and they work with the athletes on our campus where we have the skateboard, trampolines, all the training facilities. Those employees do not go back to this facility here. Those employees who are going to be living there actually are not our employees directly. They're members of the Chinese delegate, and those people don't have their own vehicles either. So we're truly hosting this entire group here. We're housing, feeding, transporting everyone.
So what's the total number in the Chinese kind of contingent that's there?
Well, as of today, I can tell you, as of today,
Approximately.
today we have about 70 athletes and another 30 employees on the Chinese side, and not all of them will live there. Some are officials, and we have to get them a little nicer house than that. So not all of them will be living on that site. They may have separate private residence, but that's an idea of what the program looks like at this point in time.
So one of the things to answer that is that, their current traffic letter was performed by a civil engineer.
Okay.
I could put one together, you guys could if you just looked at the IT manual, at least in my opinion. The traffic, Todd might disagree with me on that. The traffic impact analysis has to be performed, and the only person that would know how to perform it would be a traffic engineer like Todd.
Got it.
And then that would be reviewed by our third-party engineer, John Replinger, because our civil engineer doesn't have the qualifications to really review that.
Right, I mean, that was kind of my question is,
Yeah.
it sounds like that's needed to satisfy at least criteria C, but we don't have it.
Right.
Kelly,
But I think you'd be, oh, sorry.
No, good.
I was gonna say, but I think you'd be, if you approved this tonight, I don't know if you will or not, but if you did, you'd be making the condition that they have to go through that and adhere to it, and then work with the city traffic engineer.
As far as the context, we can wait to hear public testimony, which might inform the things that need to be addressed in that. But I would think comparing it to the existing conditional use that allows hospice, somebody could go and occupy that as hospice without coming in front of us. So maybe a comparison of the two seems like a good idea to kind of paint the picture about the seasonality of it and what that looks like. Maybe. But that's my input about what's probably relevant to.
Kelly, I have a question or on it. Since it's conditional use, and we keep talking about the 3 or 4 years, is there a condition there that says after the 4 years that we go back and look at it again because it could morph into something else? That's what I'm kind of wrapping my head around is.
Emily wrote most of this, so.
No, I don't have any timeline on it.
You don't understand what I'm saying though?
Is this for
Possibly.
3 or 4 years or longer?
Or longer. So if they change the structure and people now, I'm just being a little facetious, they can now come in and park on site, what provisions for the neighborhood, or is there anything for that?
I mean, I think we could define some conditions for that, but I'll let Spencer speak.
Okay, I mean, as we go through, we can talk about it.
I think it's a good question, though. Yeah.
If the planning commission, you certainly could tailor some conditions that could put limits on, say, cars on site and things of that nature, to protect against it kind of, the use evolving beyond the scope of what is proposed before the commission tonight. You could impose an additional condition that specifically address that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Could it specifically address it in general terms?
Well, yeah,
In
I
other
mean,
words,
it's
if
gonna.
it goes beyond this, what's being presented, as you said, without being detailed about, the clientele changes and now there's parking and all this.
The way that I would specifically address it generally is I'd have a condition imposed that said something to the effect of if the number of vehicles on site exceed what is proposed in the application by X%, the applicant shall be required to come back to the city for a modification.
Okay. Okay. And yes.
Yeah, Blaine just pointed out to me that maybe I've been presenting as this is a 4-year deal. I've been saying that's our goal, Beijing 2022. These athletes in particular are development athletes. I think there's some long shots in there. But the ultimate is, another 4 years of this program. So we don't anticipate that our tendency will cease and.
No, I think I was just kind of reading through the feedback from the neighborhoods and trying to be a good neighbor on it, is if it happened, I'm gonna say would, to morph into something else, what protections would there be in place to revisit that, to kind of protect the neighborhood?
Snowboard hostel.
No, not like that.
Yeah, but
I
you
understand,
see,
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
The
Yeah.
conditional use runs with the land, so
Yeah,
Just
would that be a
like it's-
violation of the permit, wouldn't it? I mean, that becomes a code enforcement issue after that?
it depends on how narrowly we write the conditional use or the conditions of approval.
Mhm.
I mean, to be quite honest, the previous occupant morphed. They got approval to have like a hospital bed facility there. That never actually occurred. And it actually morphed into even a less intensive use by just being an office space. But
Yeah,
if
it
you go
was
back and look at
really
their conditional use
underutilized.
permit that they got in like 2002, what they got approval for never actually was what was used, the facility was used for.
I would like to thank staff for helping us through all this. I know we've been in to visit you a lot, and it's very clear to see why it hasn't been occupied in 25 years or up to what its intended use was. There are a lot of issues, and Blaine's been a tremendous help in helping to sort through that, all the staff in the city. So we're excited to blast the moss off the sidewalks, get the cobwebs out, and get it back up to maybe not its original full glory. I don't know what it really was intended for, but there's gonna be some life in it again and get some use out of it.
This would be on the side to address F a little bit, kind of the noise. You indicated there wouldn't be any outdoor, they would be congregating outdoors to make noise, whatever, right? So what, they're kids. What is the plan inside for them to recreate or whatever? Because it sounds a little bit like a prison to some extent. Or you can't go outside,
I would look at it.
so.
I would look at it maybe a little bit more like if you go on a vacation and you go back to your hotel room. Most of your time spent was out seeing
Right.
sites, doing things. And I think for these athletes, most of their time is on snow, training. Right now, they have to be in English language class 18 hours a week, plus transport time. What we're doing right now is fighting for them to actually get enough sleep at night. Their days are too full. These kids, this is a different breed. This is not your typical recreational
Americans.
kids. So they are coming home at night, and they are resting. That's the goal.
Well,
Now,
I can see that. That's why, except for Sundays, they say, well, they're gonna put a skateboard ramp out back and play, right? Maybe on Sundays, but I can see that that's the last thing they probably wanna do after they work their tail off all day. But for Sundays, that is kind of an open day, so.
But I will address quickly, what you asked, what is inside. There are gonna be spin bikes, yoga mats, kind of the exercise balls to stretch on, and that kind of stuff. There's obviously TVs and sofas and good internet so they can, see their family back home, their young kids who are away from their parents. So I think that's a lot of what that time is doing as well.
But there's no plan to build skateboard ramps outside.
Right, just understand that.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to public testimony. And we may well have questions for you again, so don't go away. Okay, we'll have opportunity now for public testimony, and it's kind of in three parts. We'll start with proponent testimony if you're in favor of the application. Then we'll move to opponent testimony if you're not in favor of the application. And finally, if you just are what we call fence riders, you're not sure, you may just have a comment about it that may not be pro or against it. So with that said, any proponent testimony, if you're in favor of the application and would like to have some words on record. And you have to jump quickly, because we've got a full agenda tonight. Okay, if there's no proponent, we'll move to opponent. If you're not in favor and want to have something on the record. Okay, that leaves anybody who just would like to be on television tonight and make a comment, because we are on local TV.
Very low ratings, but.
Yeah. The mayor's watching.
Well, the mayor was watching. We figured that out last meeting.
Okay. Emily, any recap that you can help us with?
I think just one thing, it sounds like they're pretty on board with everything except potentially the paving of the 9 spaces. I think we'd be open to that as long as they can show they can accommodate it. So I'd probably reword our condition and maybe do a recommendation to do a parking plan for the entire site and just show where those spaces are, keeping in mind all of our code requirements. So we do only allow, I can't remember if it's 30 or 35% of the spaces to be compact. So as long as they can show us that, 70 of the spaces or whatever, I can't remember the specifics off the top of my head, are standard size spaces, and that, a car can be parked in the space and another car can get by the drive aisle in those spaces that are tight.
It's 35%.
Like here, for example, that I think there were 3 spots over here to make sure that, 3 cars could, three 18-foot long spots could fit there. I guess it's parallel parking, so it'd be 22 foot long. Is that correct?
22 feet long if they're parallel,
So if
yeah.
it's parallel parking, they would need to be 22 feet long to be a standard size, so that you could fit, 3 of those and have another car get by. I think we'd be open to that. It just, being on the site, a lot of them looked very compact, and that maneuvering around might be difficult. So as long as they can, I guess, again, just adding a condition that states to maybe do a parking plan for the entire site and just show us to their, this is a little hard to see, but they're showing, I think, 14 spaces out front, another 3 on the side, the 7 parallel ones, so that, again, those would have to be, or 70% of them, whatever, would have to be 22 feet long to count. The ones on the west side of the site, the handicap ones, et cetera, just show that they can meet that. I think it would be okay. And then I think also just a question back to them brought up but forgot to ask is, what is the plan for the bus parking? I mean, we're requesting that we get that, but I guess just maybe tonight we can get clarification if the 3 buses would be parking on site. And then also, we are basing it on the number of employees, so we were basing it on 26. They mentioned 30. I mean, it depends on how many are going to be on the site at any given time. So just in the updated kind of parking for the whole site, just clarifying that as well, I think. Because if they are parking the buses here, we do need to have space that's for the buses, that other cars and whatever can maneuver around, and that has to be cleared. So.
Okay. So I had a few additional things to add. So on the first one, on the parking, I agree with Emily that we could rework the condition to state only enough of the parking spaces would have to be paved to satisfy the parking requirements. For my experience in land use planning, though, when we get our new Google Earth imagery, it's going to be undoubtedly that we'll see parking happening in the gravel areas. I mean, it's just,
I made myself a note.
it is what it is. That will most likely happen. And even if they tell people not to park there, somebody on the staff will park there. And so my only hesitancy to allowing that up front is then it becomes a code enforcement issue, where then we're basically saying we've observed parking happening on the gravel surface spots. And now we have to enter into some code enforcement action against the Snowboard Academy. And then it kind of creates a adversarial relationship with them, essentially. And then I'm kind of the bad guy, and we have to enforce that.
Couldn't we condition it, though, that those bumpers just be moved back so that you can't park there unless you're driving over a concrete bumper?
So, in the alternative, my other suggestion to that was going to be, I think the better solution to this would be to determine how many parking spaces are needed. Say that many parking spaces are going to be paved, and then they have to extract the rest of the gravel out of there and landscape it.
Yeah, perfect.
Because if the gravel's removed, then it can't be parked on. And then if they're parking in grass, that's a violation also, but that most likely won't happen.
Yeah.
I just know from experience that there's gravel there, people will choose to
Oh,
park
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So that's one thing. Spencer pointed out that another thing we could do is create a condition around that none of the students or none of the athletes, or however you want to phrase that, can drive to the site. And so that would be a condition that would be tied to the conditional use permit. My guess is that most of these kids are not even going to have licenses, is my guess, Oregon licenses. But we could make that a condition if you guys so choose to do that. In looking at the public comments we received, I know that the applicant and a few people up on the dais also had questions about them. We're in a, this is from my predecessor who lives on Fur Drive here. We are in agreement, obviously, on the traffic analysis needing to be done, and we've recommended that as a condition. The second one that he brings up about all vehicles servicing the site shall use Scenic Street and Meinig instead of Fur. While it's nice that the applicant offers that, there's no way we could actually impose that or require that. They're all public streets. If somebody from the site chooses to use Fur Drive, there's nothing illegal about that, and we can't force anything. It's not, and even if we could, it's not like we're gonna have a police officer sitting out there waiting to arrest or find people that are doing that. So, while I understand where Mr. Brown's coming from on that, living in a neighborhood myself, there's no way we can impose that condition on this.
Why can't we? I mean, it's
It's
just
a
like anything
public
else,
street.
it's like say they can't drive cars there.
It's a public street.
Well, I know they're all public streets, but the point is it's about addressing the conditions that are they want a conditional use permit, okay? And the idea of safety was there. Also, there's a traffic light on Mining, and the buses are going up to turn left, so it just seems like traffic flow. If we're gonna address what's required through the code, I mean, what's important here, and what Tracy really brings up is that we can talk about moss on this, and we can talk about that. The core of this whole issue is addressing these, as you know, these items that are in the code that are the decision criteria for granting a conditional use permit.
Yeah, but there's no way you can condition that. We asked our engineer, we asked our public works director. I could talk to the police chief, and I guarantee they're all gonna have the same answer.
Yeah.
We're not gonna dedicate a full officer to sit out there and see where these people are driving to.
We
It's a request.
I'm just saying, I've had times seeing the difference between saying kids can't bring cars to the site and making that a condition of approval, to saying that all buses need to take this route as a condition for approval.
Because it's
Why
a
can't we
public
do that?
street. One's on the property and one's a public street. We
Well, the
can't
kids are
tell them.
driving there on a public street before they get there.
So,
It's a traffic flow pattern. Why can't we
But
condition
the other
that?
one that you can't figure out is, even in here, it could be something that the applicant to work with the city to determine the best route. Picking out the specific streets
Yeah,
here
that's,
is, I understand why the Tracy's or Mr. Brown's proposing it.
Yeah, it's a
off of his
street. He lives on the street, yeah.
Right. But even to determine that, it's a public right of way, like you said, to come in.
I mean, there's nobody in the city that would enforce it, so you can condition
Yeah.
away on that one, but
Yeah.
nothing's gonna happen, I'm just letting you
well,
know.
the fact is that it's been underutilized forever, and they're talking about utilizing that building that's in,
But the bigger thing, I think, on it is, it's a conditional use. It's
Right.
single-family residential, and that's what I feel my job here is to ensure that the folks that are living there are somewhat protected on that.
Can we curtail our
Yeah.
discussion
Okay.
until we finish up with your recap
Go ahead.
and go to
Okay.
rebuttal?
The other one, the no outdoor recreation facilities, including skateboard ramps. I think that's been well covered by the applicant. Again, we don't get involved if kids, are recreating out. I mean, for me, I have kids that skateboard on my street in Sleepy Hollow. I prefer them to be outside skateboarding and playing instead of sitting in front of the computer. The last thing I want to do as a planning director is be making conditions that are imposing kids to go inside and play. So I would not be in favor of this. We don't have any code criterion to basically state this. If they build a skateboard ramp and put it out in the road, then Public Works could pick that up and junk it, throw it out. But, if it's creating noise or anything like that, it would be dealt through with the nuisance ordinance for noise, but we wouldn't typically condition something like that in a final order. And I think that pretty much summarizes what I want to speak about.
Okay. You have opportunity for rebuttal. Either one of you to respond to what you've heard so far. Then we'll go into our discussion.
Do you have anything to add?
No,
Or respond.
on the gravel
If you,
parking.
just come back up.
No, on the gravel parking, I think it's a great idea to just grass over that, like, I think pervious surfaces, if we can get away from doing more pervious surfaces, I think we're all for the better. I agree, if it's gravel and just sitting there, you're right, probably will be used, so I don't think that's a problem
Yeah.
at all.
Okay.
One item, that was asked about was where the buses are gonna park. If the traffic study or the parking study shows that they can fit on site properly, fine. If not, right now they're on our campus. That's not a problem at all for them to be doing that kind of a loop. So we do have other space for them to park, sufficient space.
So is the intent that this kind of just the whole idea of the traffic flow? I mean, somebody driving those buses, so is the intent to have those buses in Sandy so they could just, leave from Sandy and come back? Or that you want to domicile them up at your other facility?
Ideally, I think just I look at every mile driven as a mile of risk, for everybody, not just our drivers, everybody on the road. So I think fewer miles driven is better. It would be ideal if we could place those on site if the parking study allows. I don't think that was shown at all, but if it does, that would be great. I think it's just less miles driven, which I think is good for a lot of reasons. So that would be ideal, but we do have other. We can make other arrangements locally, I'm sure, or our campus, 28 acres.
Okay. Very well then. We're going to move into our discussion time, and I'll give my little spiel. Technically, we're supposed to close the public hearing at this time. We have our own little tradition of keeping it open so that we can talk, and I'm speaking now to the audience as well, so that we can speak to the applicant for further input as we have questions, without having to reopen the public hearing for one question to get a yes or no, to close the public hearing with votes and all that stuff, motions, the whole 9 yards. So from now until to the end of this public hearing, we'll have it open so we can address you folks, and basically that's us talking to you and not you talking to us, as you're a resource for us now as we do our discussion. So with that, everybody informed. Comments, questions? You guys have had some I'll kick off with one question that you would probably know. On the traffic study, I question whether or not, when we talked about putting the traffic on certain roads, I drive a school bus. I'm not sure I could get in the way it's coming and make a U-turn out of the end of it, but your study would look at, a traffic study would look at that.
It would, especially if they're required to go back to mining,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't driven a bus through that thing, but if there's cars parked on the other side of the road,
Right.
I think I would have a challenge on you're talking 80 passenger buses, which is probably maximum size, pretty large bus. So I just say that from my experience, I don't know that you could even do that make a U-turn and go back out over to Meinig
Mhm.
in a bus.
Can I interject with one solution here?
Mhm.
I mean, I think what you could condition is that if you do have a concern about cars going down Fur, and like I said, once they leave that site, they can go wherever they want, but chances are they're gonna take the most direct route. So the best way of potentially doing that is making the east driveway that's closest to Fur entrance only for the buses, and making the one on the west end exit, so that when they exit, they'll already be closer to, what's that other street there, Revenue or?
Yeah.
Revenue.
is the next one.
And then there'd be no reason for you to then loop back around and go east again. So if you made the exit on the opposite side, you might be able to accomplish that. If you do that, you'd have to change all the angled parking to be aligned with that entrance. But I mean, if you wanted to condition that, I think that would be a fair condition.
You know,
But they would
I'm glad
still-
you said that. To be honest with you, I was simply assuming that, because where's the door on the bus? The door on the bus is on the right, you know?
That's true.
So you
Yeah,
would think that's what you would do, as opposed to everybody running around the bus. I was thinking the way it is in the school, but that is something we could condition, is, you know, the in and the out. Because the other thing, they're gonna do the same thing too, particularly when they leave. It only makes sense to, you gotta go up 26, and you gotta cross the westbound before you get to the eastbound. You're gonna do that at a stoplight, right?
Yep.
And so, obviously, Mining is the place to go and turn left. So, the only other thing is the coming part, you know, and all that Mr. Brown was suggesting is that, you know, if you look at the streets, to minimize the amount of impact within the neighborhood, would be to simply reverse that route. So,
And you'd still need to come in on Fur, probably.
Right,
to
because
make
you're
that
not gonna
move.
be able to use, I'm assuming, that you're not gonna be able to U-turn.
so your
and take a bus.
concern is they're going to the site, and if you want to, they're gonna be coming east, they gotta come into that.
They'd have to U-turn around with a
Well,
bus.
yeah, they gotta basically turn left,
Yeah,
Right,
and,
and it may be able to be engineered, who knows?
yeah.
okay,
So
well,
this seems like
you know,
it's-
it's still, if they were on Fur, that's gonna be, 3 buses once a day,
yeah.
because they're gonna be going back out the other way, and then come to three again when they come back. So it's not like the biggest thing in the world, but I'm thinking of those buses a little bit, and even though the streets in Scenic Meadows are some of the wider streets that we have in town, if you still drive up there, there's cars parked on both sides. It's, they'd be careful, but.
Okay.
So where would the buses be parked? I mean, I
Well,
guess that's.
what he said was, if it can't be engineered for them
For
to
them
park
to park.
on the property somewhere, they'll be up
They'll
the
be up the
mountain
mountain.
at their
Okay.
other place.
Yeah,
'Cause I
Or,
think-
or they
Or
could,
Well,
they
because
could,
my-
yeah, they could locally
Oh,
find a,
source of
rent
place,
the
yeah.
parking spot.
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess you have to do the arithmetic. Is it long enough for them to just park in front of the building? All 3 of them just bing, bing, bing?
But see, that seems like an impact for the houses locally. I
Not
mean,
if they're just parked.
Not if they're just parked.
I
Okay.
mean, that's just stories. The other place you're gonna
Yeah.
put them is you're gonna take
Well,
them
that's
around
what
the
the-
back.
I think our job is not to
Yeah.
do the parking lot, is to,
Yeah.
Right.
is put a
Let the
condition
people-
where
Yeah,
the applicant and the city devise a plan that works to
Yeah.
meet the criteria,
yeah,
right?
yep.
Okay, what direction do you need for any refinement of, conditions? The one that we've tossed around, I'll go back a bit, was the one on the actual use of it, and should that change? Remember that possible wording? What are thoughts on that one?
Well, I definitely like to see something like that put into it, just in case of the morphine on it, and really to protect the people living there, especially with vehicle, if the vehicle count goes up or whatever, some type of trigger that would do that. What was your?
Spencer,
Spencer thing.
yeah,
Depends if you give us some words.
He had something, if the number of vehicles exceeds by some percentage.
You know, and I Kelly and I were whispering to each
Okay.
other afterwards. The condition that he recommended was just a prohibition, that's saying restriction on students from having vehicles. And then if that changed, just having that condition in place, if it changed, that would trigger the need for a modification in and of itself.
What about if the number of staffing or whatever changes, and instead of the 26 it goes up and that generates a higher car count? I mean, I'm just trying to, so we have two numbers. We've got the number of staff and we've got the number of students. We're saying students can't drive, so that's kind of off the table. I'm not trying to be real restrictive, but I'm just
Right.
kind of looking down the road of,
Does the approval change the conditional use to a school?
Yeah, I think the code here is it's treated like a school, yeah.
A dormitory facility.
Yeah.
So something of that size, it seems like 26 employees is already kind of on the high side. If
Yeah.
some years down the road, it was some other private school or something. 26 staff for the size
That's
of
a
that
lot.
building seems pretty,
Yeah.
seems like it would only go down maybe.
Yeah.
but, so then there's no harm to put it in.
True.
That's all, again, I'm just trying to look out for the neighbors there of,
Yeah, and that would be, are we talking two conditions, the first one that Spencer mentioned, and then the one that Kelly mentioned about restricting driving of vehicles, campers, or students?
Well, what I was saying is that I think those kind of get to the same thing. Because if the concern about the morphing over time is in regard to on-site vehicles and the use of increased vehicle traffic and things of that nature, if you're restricting student vehicles and the proposal is capped at 144 students, unless the school decides to, as he was mentioning, change that ratio, which seems like a fairly high ratio of teachers to students, you're kind of addressing all of these things with one kind of simple, elegant condition that just says there's no student vehicles allowed on the property. And then you don't really get into creating the headache of having to, say you said, if there's an increase of X percent, figuring out exactly what X percent is. It's just either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Are you allowing student vehicles? Are there students that have qualified for this academy who may, have access, international driver's license? If they're doing that, then you want to allow it. It's either not. That was not what the Planning Commission approved. It's not what was proposed or approved, and so you need to come in and seek a modification for what your approval is, or you need to stop that activity, and it would be subject to enforcement.
is that then another code enforcement deal to say, is that a student vehicle or is that a employee vehicle that's there? I mean, I'm not trying to make it any harder than it is, but I probably am.
Yeah, I had a similar thought with the same disclaimer. But
I
what
mean,
if, in the future, it's parents picking up and dropping off students? The skills, I don't know the size of that building and how many students you could have in a school. I mean, obviously, the impacts to the neighborhood would be different in that scenario. We need to make sure that's not allowed in this conditional use permit.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I share the concern
Right, yeah.
over morphing to something that we can't even imagine today.
So, and I just confirmed this with Spencer, is what you're approving though, or
Is
what
this.
is before you is the applicant
Mhm.
for the Snowboard Academy.
Yeah.
So if and it doesn't sound like that Snowboard Academy, unless it drastically morphs, which I don't know. But typically, if it was a different school facility down the line with parents dropping off kids and that kind of thing, that would be, this conditional use permit would be null and void, and they would have to apply for a conditional use permit themselves.
You can't convert it to a boarding school, so to say.
No.
This is just an academy.
But part of me says that a lot of the way it's operating now, or will be, is contingent, or is reflective of Chinese culture. And should they change to a different cultural group and do the same thing, that could bring, I mean, if they were American 13 to 16-year-olds, so that's what I
Yeah, I don't
say,
know if
morphing into something we can't even imagine, and it may never happen, but that we're just sharing a concern, so.
I don't think we can base, and I don't think you're trying to do this, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we can base a decision on ethnic or.
No,
cultural.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
But,
I just want to be careful with.
Right,
with
no,
that.
I think the point is that maybe very serious students who are looking toward the upcoming Winter Olympic Games, there may not be a bunch of interest in having personal vehicles or the need for them, frankly, based on their schedules. But if it became something that was American-based and people from the region who had access to family cars and wanted to go home on that Sunday day off or something like that, that might change. But the point remains the same. If the cars became part of the picture, that it would be a significant change to the application. The approval would have to come back to the Planning Commission to modify that to allow those vehicles, regardless of, whether it's Olympic aspirations, recreational, Chinese, American, Canadian, what have you.
Right.
Okay, my intent was like to see it go through and just trying to think of something for the neighborhood people living there, that just how to give them something if parking does start and take them over, that they can go back to.
Yeah.
So
That sounds like that will.
Yeah, Neil, and I was gonna bring this up if it kind of went to this discussion, and I just will, just to kind of give a dose of reality for anybody that's listening at home. One of the other, before the Snowboard Academy came into the picture and the current property owner purchased the property, the other interest that we were receiving from 2 different applicants was another conditional use permit. And it was for, I would believe, a conditional use that would have been much less well perceived in that community. And that was for a drug and alcohol rehab center. So I think it's kind of one of those things that I think, given all the potential uses for this site, for me, if I lived in that neighborhood, this is, I think, a pretty good outcome for what that neighborhood's looking at.
Well, I was going to say.
If I can, my comments were based on not being, that it is not a good use of the facility. I don't want to go that way at all. It was, again, just going to add some level of protection to the folks already in there. So nothing against the academy, et cetera.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I appreciate that. I was going to say, it seems to me, of all the things that it could be, because I know at one point we were talking about having a convention center of some kind, and I mean, what kind of parking issues would you have there? I think as Sandy wanting to have an identity of the gateway to Mount Hood, and now where innovation meets elevation, which makes me laugh every time I say it, because of our elevation. But I think the idea of having world-class athletes coming into our community is, I think it's a really good
Pretty
thing
cool
for our community. I think it's really cool. So, with those, caveats, I'm pretty excited about it.
Okay. Let's go ahead. I don't think there's any more comments. Let's close, and then we'll try and wrap it up.
To make a motion that we close public hearing.
I second it.
Been moved and seconded to close public hearing at 8:29. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we be closed. All right, back to my original question on if you need any direction on specific conditions. Are you comfortable with the one that has to do more with the students driving vehicles?
No.
Okay.
But
you prefer the other one, the
Or
if
tied
it
to both.
changes by, or you want them both?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's just me, but I mean,
Yeah, right.
I'm just one vote. That's
Right.
So what's the other idea, I guess?
Yeah,
I'm
what
a
are
little
the two?
unclear
Well,
on
the other
second
one
idea.
was Spencer's thing of if it changes by a certain percentage or something like that. We really didn't beat that one up, but.
We'd need to flush it out a little bit more, but it was essentially kind of to try to set kind of a threshold and say if there was develop a metric that said if it went over that metric, they'd be required to come back for modification of their approval.
And would that be a combined total of students and employees?
Yeah, depending on what the planning commission wants to do.
I mean, if we're basing the parking on number of employees, we could say if the number of employees at the larger shifts exceeds, X, I mean, it could just be exceeds the number of parking spots provided on site.
Yeah.
Then
That's
they would
pretty
need to-
simple.
And then,
That's-
and then
Yeah, I
when
like
they do
that.
their parking plan update, they can choose wisely what they, just think, as they think 144 students is the absolute max, they can choose 30, 35, whatever it is, and give us a parking plan that reflects that. Again, adhering to our spacing sizes and maximum number of compact and needing to be paved and all that. I think that would be.
Yeah, I think that
Would that address your concern then?
Yeah.
Because then a finding would be that the parking spaces are there for employees.
Yeah, I mean, it's already in there that the students are.
And not for students.
Yeah, right, it's already, I mean, it's
Right.
already written up that way.
But it's, because if it was like a college dorm, we would probably be looking at spaces for students.
Right.
But we're,
Definitely a certain percentage of students,
Right.
yeah.
right, but we're saying that those, so if the amount of employees goes up, there needs to be a parking spot.
So would you still also, in addition to that, would you want the condition that students do not drive, or are you less concerned about that?
I think we're only concerned about the number of cars, right?
Okay.
Seems like a reasonable proxy for traffic impact in this
Yeah.
case.
Yeah, you have so many spaces, so much traffic.
And then the other two I had, Jerry, maybe you were gonna go into this next, was the gravel thing, with removing
Right,
any
to-
spaces that aren't paved, removing gravel and replacing with landscaping.
Mhm.
Was that something that you guys liked that idea, or?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I hate to think of putting extra impermeable surfaces where we don't need to.
Yeah, I had the same idea, that gravel, that picture of that gravel parking lot just looks so inviting.
I need a parking space.
Yeah.
And then the other one I had to kind of address Tracy's concerns, and I think probably other people that most likely live on Fur, is to design the pattern so that the entrance for the buses is on the east driveway and the exit is on the west, so basically flipping how they've designed it.
Yeah.
That's what my
Yeah.
understanding was.
I mean, that, it really just helps it, they're still gonna have to go down Fur.
Possibly,
If the
possibly.
bus can't U-turn, it's gonna be coming down, you're coming up Fur to go in.
Instead of down.
So,
Well, they will be if they can't make the turn.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, they did mention high occupancy vehicles too, so if it's like a 15-seater van, then I think that would be an issue.
So that would be
That should be
okay, but
pretty
when he
easy,
mentioned
yeah.
with 144, he said 3 buses.
Yeah. So.
Those are very high occupancy. So, okay, do you have enough on the conditions, and are we familiar enough with the conditions from staff report?
I got
There's-
it.
You have, there's 24 of them here in the back. And
Yes.
number 7 appears to cover Tracy's first comment. Is that the way you read it, Kelly?
Yeah, agreed.
Right, that's the one that'll.
And number 8 would have to be refined or modified to cover your new conditions, essentially.
I think all the parking regulations would just be modified to have them propose a parking plan for the entire site, whatever it is.
Mhm. Okay.
I mean, I think if they're doing a traffic analysis, they can look at the different turning movements for both the Sprinter van and the 40-foot bus and see the possibilities of how they can turn into that site on the east driveway.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, you can always make a condition. It's up, I mean, this is up to you guys as a conditional use permit. If you are that concerned about that driveway and limiting access on Fur, is that driveway can be redesigned to accommodate easier turning movements.
Well, see, that was my thought, would be, well, they indicated they would be glad voluntarily for the moment to use Scenic and, and mining, right? So that would be contingent upon being able to swing in there. And
I mean,
so I would suggest
yeah.
that the traffic impact, look at that. So if they need to do some work there to make that wider or whatever.
I think you could angle it so it's more of a.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It would have to be wider.
If it's possible.
If it might not be possible, I'm just
Yeah.
saying as an
Right.
option that.
I think they've heard
So-
us,
Look at that.
probably.
Yeah.
Anything else before we go to a motion?
That would have to be much longer.
Did you have
I don't
something?
know how to, no, I'm good.
Todd's already designing it up here.
He's got it half done.
Yeah, he has it, he's gonna bill him after the meeting.
Oh, could we put that as a condition, that they don't hire him as?
As their transit.
Because
Because then he'll have to recuse himself again?
Yeah.
We're done with it.
Uh-huh. That's true, that's true. Okay, well, I think we're ready for a motion. Does everybody understand what it sounds
No,
like?
How it-
And the
yeah, what
key,
does it sound
the key
like?
there with the conditions, I want to make sure everybody's clear that, you know, keep our eye on the ball. And that is, you know, we're saying that if we approve this, we're saying that there's sufficiently of all these criteria, you know, A through F, you know, are met. Either currently or through mitigation, okay?
Mhm. On the,
I mean,
right.
what they're doing, I mean, they have a lot of good information that's nice to know,
Mhm.
but the point is it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the conditional use permit. This is what has to do with the conditional use permit.
With that said, somebody make a motion for us.
So how would that be worded?
Well, it can be made simply that I assume it would be a motion to approve with the
With the changes
the
discussed?
conditions presented by
There you go.
staff
I move
in our
that,
discussion.
I move that we accept file number 18-054, the CUP Scenic Street Camp Academy conditional use as presented in addition with the comments and corrections noted before.
So, my understanding of that is it's a motion to approve 18-054 with the conditions as modified
Yes.
by
Yes.
staff's recommendations. Okay.
Yes, in our discussion. Yep.
In our discussion.
Second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve 18-054. We'll go for a roll call vote.
Okay, Commissioner Carlton.
Yes,
Commissioner Lasowski.
Yes.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel.
Yes.
Commissioner Logan.
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley.
Yes.
And Chairman Crosby.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
All right.
one to five.
Yes,
Yes.
we're going to take a
Yeah,
break,
Take a 5 minute.
5 or so.
Whatever.
Stretch.
So here's, I'll just give them to you now if you want them. And then here's,
Design review, variance adjustment, Sandy Vault self-storage. I'll begin with calling for any abstentions from the hearing body. Nothing, or any conflict of interest to declare? We're surprised, two in a row.
He's probably gonna want a paycheck for this meeting.
Yeah. Any ex parte contact to mention? Everybody's familiar with the site. We've talked about it before. Call for any challenges to the jurisdiction of the hearing body, or any challenge to any individual member of the planning commission. Okay, you heard this before, but I have to say it again. If you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comments should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes inaction for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. Staff report.
All right, so, looking at the Sandy Vault self-storage proposal.
as you can tell, Emily's been very busy lately. And she has like 2 or 3 more of these on her desk, so.
So this is kind of at west entrance to town, adjacent to the Arco and the recently approved Tractor Supply store off of Highway 26 there, with frontage on Champion and Industrial as well. The proposal is for 5 self-storage buildings, and they've also requested 5 variances. So it's a variance to allow more than the 30% metal siding that's allowed in the I1 and C2 zones. A variance to not meet the 150-foot driveway spacing minimum. A variance to allow a flat roof on buildings that have a span of less than 50 feet. A variance to allow a retaining wall in the front yard in excess of 6 feet. And a variance to reduce the ground floor window coverage requirement. They've also requested a design deviation to not provide primary entrances on activated frontages of all of the buildings. So this is the site plan here, so you can see the 5 buildings, the proposed Tractor Supply site, and how it kind of nests within that, between the wetland area there to the south and Tractor Supply. And they're not proposing anything up in the upper left-hand corner at this time, like that's under the BPA power line easements. So I'm going to walk through the variance deviation requests. So first, metal siding. So our code says the maximum amount of metal siding you can use in the I1, and this is I1 zoning, or C2 zoning, same is 30%. They have 2 elevations here, so the south elevation of building 2, where it looks like they're proposing 100%, and same for the north elevation of building 3. While these aren't super highly visible from public right of way at least, the code doesn't address that. It just says 30% is the maximum in this zone, and metal is meant to be more used as like kind of an accent. And then these south elevations of building 4 and 5, they're proposing somewhere around 36% metal siding. So that actually would be an adjustment rather than a variance, because it's within 20% of the 30% maximum. For the driveway spacing, our code says 150 feet between driveways. There is that existing common access easement that serves the Arco site and will serve the future Tractor Supply site as well off of Champion there and to the north in this diagram. That will also be used to serve this proposal. They're proposing a second driveway that will be an exit right turn only onto Champion, and that is located 101 feet from the current driveway rather than 150 feet. However, there's wetland down there to the south. So kind of the driveway could technically be moved further down, but it wouldn't be able to be between the 2 buildings and serve both of them. The third variance they're requesting is to provide flat roofs on 4 of the buildings that are less than 50-foot span. So our code doesn't allow an exception for buildings with a greater than 50-foot span to not provide a pitched roof, which is typically what we would require. So building 1 has about a 72-foot span, so that one can meet the code through that exception. However, they're proposing to kind of match that roof style on the remaining 4 other buildings that have about a 40 to 42-foot span instead of the 50-foot span. They're proposing a retaining wall in the front along Champion. It would be a tiered kind of landscape planner retaining wall, but at its highest point it's about 8.5 feet, and our code offers 6 feet as the maximum, so that would also be a variance. And then window coverage. So buildings 1 and 2 here, I believe it's the east elevation of building 1, which is the bottom image there to the right, is the only one that meets the 30, I think it's 30% for that building. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's based on the square footage. I believe that's the one that meets it, and the rest of them are a little bit shy. We think these buildings 1 and 2 look pretty good and are supportive of this variance here. For buildings 3, 4, and 5, the south elevation of building 4 and 5 up here. In the top diagram, does not meet the minimum window requirement. However, it is showing windows on the party board siding portion of the building. And then the lower diagrams here are the west elevations of buildings 3 and 4, and the east elevation of building 5, which would be visible from Industrial Way, and those are also shy, meaning the building requirement. These ones, our recommendations are to approve the variance for the south elevation of building 4 and 5 with the windows as is, but adding the metal canopies that they've been using in buildings 1 and 2 to not only unify the site architecturally, but also kind of accentuate the windows, and then also to do some trellis landscaping to cover the metal siding there, which would help with the metal siding variance request as well. And then for the west elevations building 3 and building 4, and then the east elevation building 5, to add a window, not as I've drawn it in here, but just, you know, diagrammatically space them out. But I think just adding one additional window would actually allow those to meet the 30% window requirement, and then they wouldn't need the variance anymore. So that's our recommendation. They're also asking for a deviation from providing public entrances to all the buildings. I think given the use, this makes sense. I've circled here the office. This is the main public entry. Obviously, there's not going to be members of the general public entering these mini storage units unless they go to the office and rent a unit and then have a key and code and everything to get in. So we agree it doesn't really make sense that they would need to provide public entries and connections to the public right of way for every single building. So to kind of summarize the staff recommendations based on all of these variances, we are recommending approval of a type 2 adjustment to allow up to 36% metal siding on the south elevations of building 4 and 5, the south elevation of building 2, and the north elevation of building 3. We're recommending approval of a special variance to allow the second right-out only egress driveway onto Champion to be spaced less than 150 feet from the existing common access easement. Recommending approval of a special variance to allow the flat roofs in all the buildings, not just building 1. Recommending approval for a special variance to allow the retaining wall in the front yard to be greater than 6 feet tall, to about 8.5 feet as proposed. Recommending approval of a special variance to allow less than the required window coverage on the north elevation of building 1, the east elevations of building 1 and 2, and the south elevations of buildings 4 and 5. And for 4 and 5, that's provided that they detail the metal awnings above the proposed windows and have landscape trellises in the 2 areas of metal siding. And then we are recommending approval of the design deviation to not require public entrances and connecting walkways on buildings 2 through 5. So this is a lot, and we can definitely go back to some of the images as we get into questions later.
Okay.
So the variances that they've requested that we're recommending denial on are a special variance to allow 100% metal siding on the south elevations of buildings 2 and the north elevation of building 3. So we're just proposing that they again meet that type 2 adjustment criteria of doing 36% max and kind of interspersing the metal with the hardy plank siding as they're proposing on the other 2 elevations that we have images of. And also denying the special variance to allow less than required window % coverage on the east elevations of building 5 and the west elevations of buildings 3 and 4. And that was the image I showed where just adding that one window should bring them up to meet that, meet that requirement. So then kind of looking at some of the bigger issues at the site level, we noticed after when we were doing the more thorough review after cleanness that the civic space would actually technically meet the requirement based on the square footage of all 5 buildings. They're providing, or they're proposing to provide 250 square feet, and our code would actually require, based on the square footage of all 5 buildings, I think it's 1,200 or 1,700 square feet. So we're recommending that they either meet that or request a special variance. I believe they'll be requesting a special variance tonight. In terms of parking, they're proposing 5 spots out in front and then 2 additional ones by buildings 3 and 4. We think it makes sense to have at least one spot by each building, just so a car could potentially pull off and you know, park there and not be in the parking lane or blocking somebody else's driveway access if they're just doing some rearranging or something inside. So our recommendation is to actually remove one of the parking spaces by the office. That will actually allow them to meet the landscaping requirements for our landscape bays in parking lots. And then to add a parking space near building 2 and another one near building 5. So they do have 2 spots that would accommodate that request for building 3 and 4, but we're asking for one near 5, one spot near 5, one spot near 2, and then removing one of the ones by building 1 for the landscaping. We got a comment from our transportation engineer about relocating the ingress from the common access easement to the office to be located across from the existing drive into the ARCO station. That'd be set back approximately 120 feet from the Champion Way curb. And that was a concern, I think, about stacking distance and turning, but it's more of a transportation engineer expertise point, so I'm gonna leave it at his comment. And then we also noticed in kind of the more thorough review that the building frontage along Industrial Way doesn't meet the minimum, which our code requires a minimum of 50% of the site frontage to be building. So again, we're saying, you know, the options are kind of to meet this or to request a special variance, and I believe they will be requesting that tonight as well, the special variance. This is just to dive into those 2 additional requests that we think will be made. On the left there is the civic space, so that's right in front of the office in the main kind of public face of this project. That they're providing 250 square feet, which can accommodate, you know, bench and some public art on there or something. And that seems adequate for this this project and use. So you know, we think that they're probably going to request that. And then the image on the right just shows the kind of the frontage. So when we were kind of calculating the frontage, we didn't really include the wetland area because you wouldn't really be building in that area. So that actually is to their benefit. So technically of that frontage, I can't remember how many feet it is exactly, 50% would need to be building within, a building within 20 feet of that property line, the public right of way. And right now, just that the southwest corner of building 4 is just about 20 feet away, so everything else is set back further than 20 feet. So it doesn't meet the criteria as is. And so we're saying, you know, they could either pull the buildings back and meet it, or request the variance and have you guys can discuss that tonight. So if they do request those, our recommendations are for you guys to kind of decide on that 50% building frontage along Industrial Way, whether you would require that, then to have 50% buildings within 20 feet of the sidewalk or not. I think there's benefits and disadvantages of each, you know, either way in that decision. So it's definitely something to discuss. And then probably we're recommending approval if they do ask for the variance to civic space to allow 250 feet rather than, so it's 1,727 square feet that would be required based on the square footage of all 5 buildings. Again, we do think that makes sense based on the use, so we would support that if they ask for that tonight. So just looking at a couple other kind of, you know, bigger issues that are reflected in conditions here. So again, we are recommending the 1 additional window to meet the minimum window percentage on those 3 facades, where it would be pretty easy to meet. They didn't specify whether the windows, so most of the windows are going to be faux windows, which we've already approved at that code interpretation hearing previously on this project. It was unclear whether the windows along the office would also be faux, but we think they should be real so that there can be some surveillance of the parking lot and kind of visibility into and out of that office. Might just be a matter of labeling on the elevations that these are real windows as opposed to the rest being fake windows. So again, the metal awnings above the windows on buildings 4 and 5, that's both for that architectural unity of the site, because again, this is a large site with frontage on multiple streets, and then also adding landscape trellises along the metal sides of those buildings. Our code requires a minimum of 3 Sami-style elements from a list in this section here on each activated frontage. And we did find 1 or 2. We weren't certain that there were 3 on each frontage. It might, again, just be a matter of labeling the elevations clearly to show sort of how they're moving that section of the code. Our code requires the stone base they're proposing to be wrapped around, so just detailing that again on the elevations. And then if there is any rooftop equipment plan, we need some sort of analysis to show that it's not visible from the street, especially with the flat roofs. So landscaping, as I brought up earlier, in that area near the office, our code requires like 5-foot wide planter bays, 5 feet by 17 feet. A couple of them look a little bit shy, but I think removing that one spot and then would allow for the planter bays to meet code and then to be planted with a mix of trees, shrubs, and ground cover. I don't believe they're proposing trees at this moment in all of them, but our code would require at least a structural tree in each one. And then I believe they proposed 2.5-inch caliber trees. We've gotten a lot of feedback that 2.5-inch caliber trees are more difficult to find and there's less diversity, so we would recommend 1.5-inch, which is actually cheaper and easier to find. It shouldn't be an issue or anything. For lighting, we do need an updated photometric plan that clearly shows the property line and then 10 feet beyond the property line, and then the foot candles can't exceed 0.25. The exterior lighting need to be full cutoff and a maximum of 3,000 kelvins. And then our code requires pedestrian scale lighting along internal walkways with 1.5 to 2 foot candles, and they're proposing a little walkway from Champion up to the office buildings. That's really the only spot. Typical of any other project, street improvements be required along the site frontage of Highway 26, Champion Way and Industrial Way. And then we did notice it seemed like there could be a couple additional retaining walls. We only got details and specs on that one in the front, that's the tiered landscape wall. So we are requesting additional details if there are any other retaining walls and what those would look like and their height and all that. And if they do exceed what our code says, it could require an additional variance. We don't know. And then one thing, because there are so many conditions and variances and everything being requested, one thing I missed from putting in the staff report, but remembered before tonight. So we kind of as standard practice now, I think, want to request a complete plan set showing like that addresses all of the conditions after everything's been done, and any other items that need to be updated, like the traffic study from the last one or something like that. Just a complete set that addresses everything prior to them coming back and submitting for construction plans or building permits. And that's just more of an organizational, logistical thing. It's easier to have a complete set to refer to, addresses everything. So that was a lot, but we can go over any of it or look back at any of the pictures if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
And then I think you did receive a couple comments today that trickled in. Last minute.
Do you have any responses to the comments received today, or do you want to help us later on it?
I mean, I don't,
There's nothing about preventing you from blocking another site. I mean, they have every right to build in the site. So.
Yeah, the ones from Mr. Kassab. I'm not an attorney, but I don't believe either of the issues he's raising are valid. One of them is, like Emily just pointed out, that these buildings may or may not block part of his building. I mean, with the exception of one of the buildings, Mr. Benson's, the applicant's other buildings are all 1-story tall and they're flat roofs. So it's actually pretty much, from what I can tell, the least height buildings you could actually propose on the site for the most part. So I'm a little confused by that.
Tractor Supply will be taller.
Yeah, that Tractor Supply will be definitely more imposing than these ones.
I think they probably didn't even look at the plans. It was almost like a placeholder thing, and
Yeah.
I agree, unless there's some height restriction or view easement kind of a thing, it's.
Exactly. And then, so the other one by him is that 4 city managers ago, I think at this point, Mr. Lazenby, what was that? 3 city managers ago, I guess. And 2 mayors ago, promised him some signage along the highway.
They want
he wa-
to,
if he
it
wants
seemed
to
to me like
enter
they
an
want to build
agreement-
their own sign. They
Yeah,
can do it.
and if he wants to enter an agreement with Mr. Benson or anybody else along the highway and probably pay a lease amount for the signage, go ahead, it's a sign permit. But otherwise, we're not in the business of forcing people to let other people put signs on their property. Not only would it be illegal, but it's just something we wouldn't even want to entertain.
I think from the legal perspective, the way to say that is that the city just doesn't have the authority to impose requirements that would satisfy these requests.
And then the other 2 from Mr. Brown, I was actually kind of surprised he commented on this. You know, I don't know about winning awards or whatever for variances or deviations. We just simply process applications, and so I'm not going to really speak to that first paragraph in his comments. Pest control evaluation, I mean, I'm not that hung up on that one either way. I will tell you that we were having some issues with rat nests a couple years ago, and he is correct in that I don't know if there's anything specifically in the code that would require this. However, we've been requiring it for 2 years, and everybody's just done it. And I think pretty much most people haven't found rat nests, but I think it's like something that costs a couple $100. They do an evaluation to determine if there's any rodent issues. The other idea is that they could just go ahead and not have this done. However, if it does cause some issues, it will most likely affect his other property holdings or potentially the Tractor Supply store in the future. So I think it's probably in everybody's best interest to do it, but either way, I don't think staff's really that hung up about it. We're just trying to do what's right there. And then the 3,000 kelvins, while it doesn't specifically state that in the dark skies ordinance that we have, the dark skies ordinance that we currently have is so outdated that it doesn't even really allow LED lighting, which I don't think we want to prohibit. And it does have some requirements about light intensity that would be actually lower than 3,000 kelvins for low pressure sodium. So I think, and then if you look at, what is it, the International Engineer of Light and also the Dark Sky Association, they're both recommending 3,000 kelvins or less for both
The
human.
American Medical Association, Audubon, and
Yeah.
the International Dark Skies, that's the standard, so it's, I mean, I could do it.
I mean, from my
Our
understanding.
code is very outdated.
Yeah, our code's like 20-something years old. From my understanding from talking to other applicants, the 3,000 kelvins doesn't really change the price of the light fixtures or anything else. You still have to meet the foot candles, so my recommendation would be to leave it, but, I mean, he is right. There's nothing exactly that says 3,000 kelvins in the code.
Our code
Well, let's just,
cites
let the
low
applicant,
pressure
see what the
sodium,
applicant
which is
says, so.
2200 kelvins.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Our code cites, it says the preferred illumination source is low pressure sodium. This is like from the 1970s standard, and that's 2200 kelvins. So currently LEDs are more typically used. They typically come in 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 kelvins. American Medical Association, International Dark Skies Association, and
Audubon.
recommend 3,000 as the max. That's for both human health. This is the same reason you have blue light filters on your computer screens and phones. I don't know if any of you do, but there's a lot of impacts on human health and on bird migratory patterns and just dark sky pollution.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the basis for that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions for staff or clarifications, requests? Okay, we'll move to applicant presentation.
Good evening. Wow. It's a lot to talk about tonight. My name is Tim Brenner. I'm president of Access Design Group, located at 52 Northwest 2nd in Gresham, Oregon. And thank you for having us tonight. I was making a comment on the last applicant as more of a joke, but I was really hoping they were going for bronze or silver. not gold.
Yes.
So he did say gold, and I was like, well, leave some space for Sean White. But anyway, it's kind of funny. They're doing
Chinese want to look good
Yeah.
in their Olympics.
Yeah, they're doing some pretty cool stuff. I mean, it really puts Scenic on the global map. It's pretty incredible, actually. So anyway, thank you for having me tonight. Wow, so a lot to talk about tonight. I wanted to kind of start off with just a brief comment just about, the decisions that we have to make tonight, and I'll get to.
Okay.
Am I good?
Sorry, yes, go
I'm
ahead.
trying to remember if you gave your name and address.
Yeah, you got it?
Yeah, you
I
did.
did.
Okay.
We got it.
I can give it again if you want.
Nope, it's on the record.
But just, just for the record of really what we're here tonight for is, I'm gonna talk about the site and some of the challenges with this particular site. It's a very challenging site to build on and to develop. So we've had to be very creative in how this is even possible to make it work. And hence the reason for a lot of variances, because a lot of it does have to do with site issues, constraints, challenges with that. The use itself allowed outright, so how do we fit that into this property? The point I wanted to bring up is, as a commission, you do have the ability, unlike staff, to make decisions that kind of enforce the flavor of the code or the intent of the code. But a code is a code. It's very black and white, and sometimes it doesn't fit on every site. Hence the reason why I do not like to come to planning commission hearings when staff is recommending a denial. It's not how I like to do things, but we've got to a place on, really in particular, 2 items that we couldn't come to agreement on, and that's why we're here, and that's why this process is in place. So at least we have a discussion about it. We're gonna make our best case to explain why we're doing what we're doing. So at any rate, I think what we'll do is get into the presentation. The site, as you can see up there, has a lot of factors involved that we're dealing with. One is street frontage. It has a small street frontage over on Champion, a very small street frontage on Industrial Way. So we have 2 access points that we have to deal with that are very short, and we're bounded by development on the north, a brand new development that you recently approved for the Tractor Supply Company. We're going to show some diagrams that we've created to show the relationship of our property development to that property. I think it'll be very eye-opening. It was to me when we created the drawings. And also topography. It's a very steep site, hence the reason for one of the special variances where we're needing to have a little bit taller wall along that frontage on Champion Way for the retaining walls, because the site is very steep. And if you look at our exterior elevations for that building number 1 in particular, you'll see how steep the sidewalk is and the public right-of-way is in relationship to where our property is. The other thing that I wanted to talk about briefly, and then I'm going to pass this over to Jonathan in my office, and he'll introduce himself. But when we're dealing with a property like this and a use like this, we have to be, we do our best to comply with code, with the design guidelines. I've done several projects here in Sandy, so I'm quite familiar with them. And they can be very challenging depending on the uses. This particular use is not maybe the type of use that you would want windows in. It's a storage building, so if you're renting space, do you want a window in the unit? There's security issues, there's challenges like that. But we have to try to comply the best that we can, and I feel like we've made a pretty solid effort to get to that point. Okay. Most of the conditions that have been brought up that staff is recommending approval for, we agree with. So we're totally in cahoots with all of those items, and there's quite a few. However, there are a couple that I'm going to have Jonathan come up and talk to you about now that we still want to discuss further. And so, Jonathan, would you like to come up? And then I'll probably pipe in every once in a while here.
So, Jonathan Conkle, also with Axis Design Group, 52 Northwest 2nd and Gresham. So, I guess I'll keep this fairly brief because, as Tim said, for the most part, we concur with most of staff's findings. I think we've gone through quite a few iterations on this design to make sure that we're complying to the best of our abilities given the type of program that we're trying to put on here. Next slide. So, as we've interpreted the Sandy style to the best that it makes sense for a storage building, and as staff noted, we do think that it makes sense to have actual windows in the office. So what you're looking at in this render at the top here, those are genuine windows that allow light into the office and allow passive surveillance of the street and parking area. Next. And the staff report already showed you the elevations, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this. We can look at this one. The area, as you can just note at the bottom here on building 2, that we are partially wrapping that south facade with the Hardy and split face CMU treatment. It's just turning the corner and going a little ways back there. Next one. And you'll see the north of building 3 is the other area where we're proposing 100% metal siding. So the reason for those is that given their locations on the site, it is a maintenance issue, and we can avoid having to repaint and deal with mildew and other unsightly issues of that. Next week. So first of all, regarding building 3, the north facade of that is one that we were just talking about. If you look at the bottom here, you can see the line of sight from Highway 26, and given the grade shift, if you're up at Highway 26 and you're looking down there, there's a retaining wall at the back of the Tractor Supply property that's just been approved, and they also were required to put a 4-foot fence at the top of that. So if you look over that, you're actually not going to see our buildings at all. And the right side there of those 2 buildings at the bottom, building 3, that's the part that we're discussing here, and as you can see, it's completely not visible from anywhere off-site. Therefore,
Does everybody understand what building 3 is? Can you
Mhm.
see it on your plans? I didn't know if we need to point it out or not.
No, we wouldn't
Okay.
see it.
Can we get a map here and get that over some?
Our finger doesn't work on televisions. Yeah,
yeah.
No, we see you.
okay.
So that, we think that addresses the situation with building 3 pretty clearly. As you can see, actually through a lot of the site where the section cut line is drawn, you can't even see it because the Tractor Supply Company building is physically blocking it. Next please. And then regarding the south side of building 2, there is significant vegetation that will remain because it is in a wetland buffer area, and because of that, that's going to stay there in perpetuity. And even, we took this photo yesterday afternoon, the one on the bottom for winter, and as you can see, even in those conditions, with no leaves on it, it pretty much completely obscures the south side of building 2. The top image is pulled off Google Street View, and I think that's a photo that was taken in June or July. And as you can see, the building's completely obscured except for the nose of it that's pointing out toward Champion Way. So for that reason, plus the portion that goes back, was about 20 or so feet, where it wraps the corner, we think that satisfies the criteria. So the window issue is one that we are happy to resolve with additional windows. This is just sort of showing the treatment that we're applying to the portions of buildings 3, 4, and 5, where they adjoin the driveway that provides access off Industrial Way. So those are the dummy windows that Tim spoke about that are mounted on the wall. Next, please. This is what we submitted, and this fell a little bit short numerically, and so, next please. What we're proposing is just add an additional window, and the extra square footage, I've highlighted the facades in question on the table there, and that gets us to the 30% requirement. So we're prepared to make that adjustment and accept that as a condition of approval. And finally, as Emily suggested, we are requesting the special variances. Next, please. So the first one is for the 50% frontage requirement on Industrial Way. There are several reasons why we think this is appropriate. First of all, as Tim alluded to, it is a challenging site. If you look at how much of it's notched out for Tractor Supply, fitting this program, which is inherently linear, because you want to have all these bays with roll-up doors, right? And that's kind of the nature of these buildings, is they're long, narrow structures. So you need to have them roughly parallel, facing each other across that driveway. And I've indicated the green part on there, showing where the roll-up door frontage is and how that adjoins the driveway. Also, because of the topo of the site, the most logical place for us to position our wetland mitigation buffer is at that bottom corner, which is kind of encroaching into that 20-foot frontage. And finally, we also think it will present a more attractive streetscape ultimately for this area. Next, please. Given this is how our next door neighbor, this is what's presented to the public realm from the Champion Auto Body facility, which is just to the east of us. And I think by turning the building a little bit, extending more greenery off to the left of where that Douglas fir is, will actually create a more pleasing streetscape ultimately. And the second special variance request is for the public plaza, and we concur with staff's recommendation that this should be approved. Please. And it's this area which we have landscaped and paved in front of the office space. That concludes my presentation.
Okay. Any questions right now?
I have a quick question. Can you talk more about the, excuse me, the proposed metal siding on the south side of 2 and north of 3? Is that painted, or how does that compare to what would meet the code requirement?
So pre-finished metal siding, and you're talking about, there were a lot of different, calling out different elevations on different buildings, so Todd, what was that again?
Oh, the south of building 2 and north of building 3, the two that are proposed at 100% metal siding.
No.
Yeah, so the proposal is to use the standard pre-finished metal siding. What on building 2 on the south elevation, we're wrapping the kind of southeast corner, and we're coming back about 1 bay in that building. So we are continuing the elevation along Champion Way around that corner about 20 feet and wrapping that, and then transitioning to the metal siding. That's why in our, could you go to those pictures that Jonathan showed, one more there? So can I point?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just need to touch point. My pointer doesn't work on a screen, so I can't use that. But that's why we did these 2 elevations, because this is the building in question, building 2. So this is a hardy panel siding, and then it has the veneer base on the foundation, and that will wrap around to about 20 feet into the building, so that'll be consistent, and then it'll transition from there to be metal siding. One thing about metal siding is it's low maintenance, very low maintenance. It does not have to be painted. It does not have to be cleaned as much because it's a very smooth surface. And part of the concern is we're right adjacent to those wetlands. So if we have to get in there and power wash or clean those, it's a problem. And so we were hoping to only have to do that around the corner back about 20 feet because we can still access about that much of it. And I think from the public realm, that's what you see when you're driving. On the north elevation of building 3, if we go to the, I think it's the one before this with that site section. So I just thought this was a really interesting thing. We took our site plan and then we put the Tractor Supply Store site plan so you can kind of see them together and how they are going to interact together. And the Tractor Supply has about a 20-foot retaining wall across the back of their property. Plus they have a 4-foot side obscuring fence on top of that. So if this is Highway 26 out here, this is the Tractor Supply building. And then this is the back of their property where they have their large retaining wall and their 4-foot fence. So your sight line is here and is stopped. Meanwhile, our buildings are down here for buildings 3 and 4. So our thought was the back side of building 3 here, which is really facing the bank, and that retaining wall area didn't seem logical to us to need to be hardy panel siding because it really wasn't affecting the public realm because it was kind of hidden or tucked away in there. So that's why we're asking for that variance for that facade.
So just to clarify, the key areas, the underlying criteria here is you can't see it, that's where you want to use the metal.
That's what, yeah, I mean, that's what we're hoping to do in those 2 instances.
Okay,
yes.
so those two, it's the south of 2 and
Yep.
north of 3.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because I was just clarifying, because your suggested variance is to allow greater than 30% metal siding than just period, in other words, on the entire complex. So I just want to make sure I understand exactly where you're kind of saying you want to do it, which I think the staff has been doing the same thing.
You want to hit on that?
I don't know, Emily's been, again, working on this one much more
I'm
than me.
confused about the question.
Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is their written variance is to allow greater than 30% metal siding, period. So I would interpret that to be on the entire project, all 5 buildings, et cetera. Now what we're saying is that, what they're saying is that they definitely would like to do it on the south of 2 and the north of 3, but they're not saying they're going to do it on any of the others.
Yeah, these
All metal, I mean.
2 elevations in particular, we're just asking those to be all metal.
Yeah.
For these 2, but the rest of them, we're doing the 30.
Right, so if I take your
Please
first
correct.
variance and just add to it, south of 2 and north of 3, that's exactly what you're proposing.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's what, I understand.
Thank you for clarifying it for me. It's kind of confusing, but yeah. That's why the building elevations have the sections that are higher with hardy panel, with metal siding in between, and they vary in elevation.
Well, we this goes back to the first hearing we had on this, which is really just the definition of a window. But we got into this general discussion because it was the areas that you can see have one idea in mind. The areas that you can't see, that's what said, well, maybe we don't need windows as an example.
Right.
Yeah, and as you guys know, the code doesn't really currently say anything.
It's black and white.
Right, that's why we're here with this process, is to have, is that reasonable in this situation or not?
Okay.
We have that ability to make that decision.
Yeah, right now, I think it says something to the fact of basically all elevations or all building planes shall be no more than 30% metal, so I don't think it really gets to the
It's
specifics.
not tied to activated frontage the way the Windows one is, and it's not tied to visibility from the public right of way, so our thought was, that south side of building 2, is somewhat visible through the trees currently, but that's just one angle. As you're walking along that sidewalk, in theory, there should be space between the, tree canopy and the building, and so that might be visible from Champion Way, and then that building 3, the Tractor Supply directly behind it here is where their outdoor storage is, and in other areas the parking. And yes, there's a retaining wall and a 4-foot fence, but you can see over the 4-foot fence, so that would be visible. And again, it's not tied to visible from a public right of way, it's just, you know, the code just says
Yeah.
no more than 30%, it's
Yeah.
meant to be an accent.
You know, and the only reason I ask the question is because there's so many of these, and then some of them are compound.
Mhm, yeah.
Okay, like
Yeah,
the
break it
one
down,
that
yeah.
you are suggesting at the bottom of page 41, you know, the last part of it is the south elevation 2 and the north of 3. Now, you're saying 36. What's in front of us is that, or 100%, as an example,
Yeah.
okay?
Or,
But-
or,
Yeah.
or 30%.
Or
Right.
or 30,
Yeah, we were
okay.
recommending the type 2 variance similar to the other two.
Okay, so the other issue, though, will still come up, and that's the south elevations of 4 and 5.
Yeah, on those elevations, we're concurring with staff, where we're gonna add the awnings. Yeah, we haven't asked for a special we're doing those awnings in other places, so. And the end elevations of building 3, 4, and 5, that, I think one could question if 3 is that relevant, but, they do face the driveway. And so, we were at 23%, and the code is 30%. Are we gonna argue about 7%? No.
Well,
So
the only
that's
I'm
by
just gonna.
adding that added window, then we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference here, and that is that the south elevations of 4 and 5, we went through this meeting ago,
Uh-huh.
are visible from Industrial Way.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Completely.
the other two, we're saying, are not visible unless you're standing there looking at it.
Right.
To me, that's important, as what we might want to do as a commission as far as
Yeah, we
granting
need that.
something, right?
Yeah.
And the only reason I'm saying that is there's so many of these, if we can understand each one as we go, then at the end of the day, we're a little further off than trying to,
Okay.
Then, if I may, the special variance that we are asking for tonight, that was in your staff report, as we may ask for it or may not, and that has to do with the location of Building 4. And so that is important for a couple of reasons. And Jonathan, you know, really, I think, explained himself very well. But when you get into the real fine details, when we do the site development permit application for this, there is a wetland boundary zone
right?
that's offset, you know, from the wetland. And so the code allows some encroachment into that, but you have to mitigate if you do that, okay? And so and then there was also a comment, I'm gonna tie all this together, about other retaining walls. And so where you'll notice this, I'm gonna talk about the retaining walls first and then come back to the boundary. And may I go over here again and point? When you look at the site plan closely, there is a retaining wall, a very low one, across this edge where this drive aisle is. It's about 2 feet high. So now you know that. I just verified that with our civil engineer. We can call that on the plan, perfectly fine. But it will slightly encroach a couple of feet into that wetland boundary on just part of that. And then our idea is you have to mitigate for that. If you take something away, you've got to give it back equal, okay? And so our thought was to locate that added wetland area between Industrial Way, right-of-way, back of sidewalk, and our Building 4. With Building 4 slightly skewed, slightly back, it does leave space to be able to add that area in, and it makes sense because the wetland boundary and wetland is already there. That's right where the outfall is that goes into the culvert. There's already the correct type of landscaping, and so it's connected to that wetland. So that's why we wanted to locate it there, and we've created the space for that, with Building 4 being slightly askew. If Building 4 is located 20 feet back, it will be a shorter building, and we're able to build right up to that line. And the next slide. That's why we wanted to show, I'm sorry, one more. Two more. Trying to remember all my slides. So that is that area that we're wanting to do that wetland buffer. Again, this isn't wetland, this is buffer zone that we're trying to mitigate for. So that's what we're trying to add right here, okay, in that green area here. Next slide. And what we're trying to avoid is this, where we build right up. You have this harsh, transition. It's not even really a transition. It's just a harsh line from wetland to a building or to a structure. And our thought was, if our building is located down here, we can landscape that really nice so it kind of all ties into the natural vegetation. So I think it's a really nice opportunity to take advantage of that space to expand the natural vegetation in that area. And plus that facade will also have windows on it, the hardy panel siding, and the awnings, and it'll be slightly set back overlooking that area, that landscape area. So that is something that we would need your approval on to move forward.
Okay. We will move on. Again, I think everybody was here before, heard my speech about proponent, opponent testimony, so we'll call first for proponent testimony if you're in favor of the application. Now's your time to speak. Okay, any opponent testimony? If you're not in favor, would like to speak? Okay. Or if you just have a comment or additional question and not sure whether you're for it or against it. Y'all are pretty quiet. Okay, we'll move right on to staff recap.
Okay, so I think we've kind of covered the metal part, but just to reiterate again, just based purely on our code, it doesn't just apply to activated frontages or frontages visible from the street. So as we applied it, it would limit it to 30%. So that's kind of that piece. It's different than the window thing. In terms of the 50% frontage on industrial, like I said before, maybe you can see the advantages and disadvantages of each. I think the intent of that section of the code is really about pedestrian activation, and it seems to me that kind of increasing the landscaping, adding more, the natural vegetation back into that area will create a nice pedestrian environment. So I think I would be supportive of that, and then probably to say do a similar treatment then to that south side of building 5 if you're not planning to bump that one back down too. Eventually industrial will go through, so we are thinking kind of further into the future about that streetscape and just kind of creating, street trees and sidewalk and then maybe some nice buffer planting. So I think that would work for us to approve it with that landscaped area, and again, adding more landscaping to building 5, and then it sounds like we are more or less in agreement on.
I'm like, can you change it back to where it shows the buildings?
Just tell me what
It was the one that showed the Tractor Supply in the front.
Oh, yeah.
There.
That one. So the one, I think it's building 3. That's the one that's 100% metal, is the proposal?
Just the north facade.
Just that
right?
side facing Tractor Supply is
Just
proposed.
this side right here. Just that elevation
Oh, okay.
on this side that
Which one?
faces.
That whole
Yeah.
one, right.
Yeah.
And you were saying, I think, Emily, that will be visible from the Tractor Supply outdoor area?
I can't say for sure, it seems like it would be, it's a 4-foot fence, and I'm taller than 4 feet, and I'm pretty short, so. Yeah, I imagine you can look down and see it, but, I mean.
But they're in a
that's
Tractor
usually
Supply
that's an
place.
argument
The fence,
to-
you'll see
yeah,
it.
to-
Yeah.
See it.
If we're gonna
Got
go,
it.
we're just kind of going with the code.
Yeah.
That's what
Nope,
the
I
code
get it.
says, so,
This was a trust
Yeah.
turnaround.
It's open, right?
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
That's
So
all wall.
keep in mind that on Tractor Supply, you know, this is a parking lot and this is their display area for their vehicles. And if you look at the line of sight to even see that, you would literally have to be standing in the landscaping to look over the fence to see down to that. Because
Okay.
of there's
Okay.
quite a grade change there. So
Okay.
you would have to be really close to that fence along there to
Got
see
it.
down.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, to me, personally, I don't think if the north side of building 3 was metal, it would be that big of a deal.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that's
I
what
don't
I'm
either.
thinking.
See, that's why I did it kind of
That's why I
initially.
was
To me,
clar- I was
mentally, I said
clarifying
those
it.
were fine.
I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, this was one of the better visual presentations I've ever seen at a planning commission meeting.
Yeah, I thought it was good
In my
too.
15 years of being a planner,
Yeah.
I just want to compliment you guys on that. And I think this document, or not this document, but this diagram on the bottom, if we would have had that when we were writing up the staff report,
Oh.
I think would have went a tremendously long way, and probably us even just saying in the staff report that the
Yeah.
north side of building 3 is probably fine to be done.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, it's really helpful.
the only thing I would point out, this is your guys' decision, that's why, you guys are here. The south side of building 2, I get their point. The only thing I'd caution on that is that, if trees do, I know they're not planning on touching any of them, but if they do fall down over time and stuff, I think you'll be able to see that facade
Mhm.
more.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a big deal that it's metal and you're gonna be probably a couple hundred feet away? So you might not even be able to tell it's metal, I don't know. I mean, it's really a judgment call. I don't think it's probably a huge deal, but, just try to keep that in mind, that one could change in the future if trees are
Just
removed or fall down.
vegetation.
The other one, backing up to a retaining wall, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, with building 2 also, I think my understanding at least is that the hardy board siding and the metal would be painted the same color. So it would be more or less the same. I think the distinction would be if it was hardy board siding and metal, there might be some relief difference. It just
Mhm.
provides a little bit less of like a continuous
Yes,
wall
solid wall, yeah.
view. But
It'll look different.
aesthetically, it's
Um,
would be the same color.
Could you go to the overhead that basically shows the elevations? It's probably back towards the front. Let's see, that one, I think, how about the one you just went by, Emily? Okay, that one, kind of hard to point from here, but the one on the, up 2 on the left,
You go here.
yeah, that one is the south elevation of 4 and 5. So back to the first special variance that staff wrote, that, this is the first part of that sentence. The back part of that sentence is the other one. So back to this one, you're suggesting that 36%, no more than 36% would be metal, right?
That's what they're already showing.
Okay, and where's the metal then on this versus the hardy plank?
It's where the metal is the ones between the windows, so it's.
The metal is
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
and this hardy plank here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're also proposing trellises, right?
Yeah, so this is the one that's highly, these are activated frontages, these are visible from
Right.
Industrial Way, and so we're proposing, again, the metal awnings to kind of match architectural style, and then some landscape trellises, which would kind of go with the increased landscape buffer to allow those buildings to also be set back further than 20 feet.
So the way this one sits, look at the square footage, in other words, it meets the 36% requirement.
Right, which is still a type 2 adjustment.
Right,
But
right.
we're
Right, because the code says 30.
30.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, that does.
So I think I pretty well understand your first written type 2 adjustment actually on the bottom of the 41. That's what I was trying to do, is understand each of these as we go and the reasons why.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. All the rest of it's interesting information, but.
I mean, to me, if they're, I think if you went with our recommendation, it sounds like the applicant's very willing to go with that as well, and do like some extra treatment on those facades that are gonna be highly visible for industrial, especially as industrial expands west out to Orient someday. I think, for me at least, I'm a little bit less concerned about providing metal on a few facades if we can kind of strike a middle ground and beef up those facades
Right.
that you're really gonna see when you're driving by or walking by in the future. I think it's a decent compromise, personally.
So, Jerry, Are we in the discussion part now, or are we kind of done with staff recap? and
They've done recap,
applicant?
they all have opportunity for rebuttal.
So we're in staff recap still now,
Yeah.
right? Okay, good. Let's go ahead and proceed.
Anything else?
Anything else, Emily?
I mean, the only thing I want to, and maybe you guys will get to this in discussion, I'm assuming you will, but I just don't, I mean, this, to me, how I look at land use applications like this is you're not setting precedents just because you're granting variance to a specific site. Some people don't view it
Right.
the same way, but I think that's how land use works.
Mhm.
You know, as the applicant pointed out, there's special circumstances for topography reasons and use of the building that might not be the same with other buildings in that zone. So to me, I don't think you're really setting that. But the one thing to consider when you're kind of going through everything tonight is, while the staff has recommended support of a lot of these variances or adjustments with maybe some tweaks or conditions, I just want to make sure that you're all, you know, it's your decision in the end. So if there's any recommendations that staff has made that you think, you know, in support of the applicant's proposal that you don't agree with, I would hope we'd have a discussion on that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe there isn't, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, the way I looked at it is, I mean, they asked for, you know, these, and you've rephrased them, and so everything they've asked for, this is encapsulated. So if we just focus on yours, which when we get to, just look at them one at a time, we can probably click this all through here, be out of here before 11.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah. And I think in just kind of summarizing, I think we were trying to take an approach of, it is a unique site. It is, Mr. Benson's right in coming to you guys before, it is an allowed use. However, you have to meet the design standards. So we're trying to take that into effect as well, as far as it's a unique site, it's a unique proposed idea for the Sandy style requirements. And so we weren't trying to recommend denial on most of their variances and deviations. We were trying to recommend slight modifications and tweaks with the conditions so that we would still be honoring or passing a lot of those requests, but with slight modifications to those. So that's what we were attempting to do here.
Appreciate
Yep. Okay, you have the opportunity to rebut the final word before we discuss, if you have anything.
I don't have any more
Okay.
comments today.
Well, we keep it open, so that.
Yeah.
you can-
So we're gonna keep it open now, which will allow us to ask
Shoot
you
for 11,
questions.
So I don't listen anymore.
Yeah. We wanna beat city
I
council.
do tell, I'm gonna set a deadline, because then we get something done, right?
I was thinking 10:30, but.
Yeah.
But I'll give you
Yeah,
50
what's so
cents for
special about
10:30.
11?
Yeah.
My wife put my kids to bed, so I'm good. I can stay as late as you want, so.
And Don, here's your time.
Okay. Don, I'm trying to find the pages that you're looking at. What
What page?
I'm on page 41 and 42, so it's basically the staff report. And the staff report, they summarize the recommendations right up top. There's obviously, there's, you know, 60 some odd recommendations in the back, but I would say we took these first,
Okay.
page 41 and 42.
41 of 243 and 40.
What is it?
41
Yeah, that's what I'm,
of 243. Looks like this.
okay. They're the dickens to find, because they're not,
41 of 243.
So I think Don and I came to the same place in terms of where to focus on, because that's what I printed off. And it's a great place to start and end up with.
So you found it yet, Jerry?
no.
I think if you're looking at that on the screen, it's page 1 of this agenda item, I think.
Well,
Yeah, I'm looking at
I'll make a kind of a comment that you made, Kelly.
It's like a summary.
I don't consider this, to use your word, as a compromise,
There's
Way up.
because
up front.
that's where I think
Oh, way at the
Don's
beginning,
thing is
so
a
I should
slippery
go
slope.
up.
We get into these compromises, trading this for that. I think I'd rather try to look at it as both sides have shown good faith of making the adjustments that are practical.
Yeah.
So we're not really giving, trading
That
out
page in the next,
on it. So
Yeah, I agree.
just scroll down.
it's not a compromise, it just makes sense.
Come on.
Yeah,
Right?
I think
Yeah.
so.
The code has these allowances built into it for exactly that reason, to accommodate some flexibility when needed. And also, I think Kelly makes an important point that from the Planning Commission's point of view and the city in general, it doesn't carry precedential value. It's just because the Planning Commission determines in this context the flexibility is or isn't warranted, that doesn't necessarily carry over to the next application.
Right, that's exactly what variances are for, is we know the code doesn't
Yep.
fit everywhere, and
Right.
then there's that standard phrase at the top, and that is, the condition they're asking for a variance for is not of the applicant's making. So
Well, this
that's
is
where you get to
actually the-
topography or something like that.
Yeah, this is actually the special variance, which even
Yeah.
gives you guys more flexibility to.
Well, I'm just pleased after coming through that the applicant has come back and made the adjustments to, really get really close, if not there, on what the Sandy style intent is, so.
Yeah, so looking at, if you look at the bottom of page 41, I don't know if, Emily, are you controlling the screen?
Is that?
Is there any way you can bring up the bottom of your staff report? It's page 41 of the big.
So that's the iCompass thing. There's actually another list at the end of the actual.
Right.
I mean, I think it's the same list though.
Well, yeah, because you have, at
It
the
is,
end,
isn't it?
you have, you've got this long list of, starting on page 98 of your,
Yeah, and I'm showing it's page 1 of the staff report on the file I'm looking at.
right, so, but anyway, if it's okay, that's where I looked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the same list.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So
So
if
should
we
we
just go
start?
through these, we can, see,
Uh-huh.
discuss them, decide up and down.
Yep.
Let's go front.
Straw poll.
I'm gonna follow, Jerry, let's follow your lead and just step through them.
Okay.
Okay.
The first one,
Can I just confirm some for
yeah,
the
sure.
applicant and us, just so we're not looking at different lists?
Make sure we're on,
Yeah.
make sure we're on the same page.
So this is what we're looking at, is that
Staff
back,
report?
That's where I
the
am.
page 54 and 55.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
that's the one page report in
I'm here,
iCompass.
54, I'm
If you go to page,
54 and 55, which is,
yeah, I don't know, it prints off.
Yeah,
if you
I'm-
go down here,
Well, that's when, we
It is
need to all get on the same page.
but
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to.
this is the
So
recommendation.
keep going back on that. It
Here,
should be
the
the last
other
two
one is
pages.
outlining
Staff
the
report.
variance. At the 54,
So if you go all the
55
way
is
back to
the
page
actual
54.
I'm at
recommendation.
54.
Yep.
and
the staff
Yep.
So it's just still part of your staff report.
So it's,
I got it.
54, 55.
Almost there.
there we are.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, we worked out that. It's really the same thing.
It's
Which
just
is not-
little.
okay.
It is.
I'm
Right,
looking
but
at
we
this
want to make
96.
sure we're on the, literally the same
Is that where
page.
you guys are gonna go? Is there?
It is the same.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the
Yep.
same thing.
It's on
You
it.
do that.
Um,
And then it's on the.
Right.
But I'm
we
looking at
wanna-
this one.
We want to literally be on the
Two
same
that
page.
they were
Go, Jerry.
Okay.
Theoretically proposed.
May I have your attention?
And what the 2 cents.
Boom, boom.
We're looking at the first one, which is a type 2 adjustment to section 179120 to allow up to 36% metal siding on the south elevations of buildings 4 and 5, the south elevation of building 2, and the north elevation of building 3.
Yeah, and they've agreed in that first one that they're okay with that. That's what I pointed
That is
out.
correct.
So that one should be a no-brainer.
Yep.
The real question is, are you okay with all metal on the other two, on the north of 3 and the south of 2? Well, not all metal, because 2 wraps. And so there's the part, there's 20 feet or something like that. So that's really the question.
It appears that there's only one that they're in disagreement on, and it's
Yeah, it
the
is.
south of 2.
2,
And that's
right.
the special elevation that's down at the bottom of the page.
Yeah,
Correct.
right.
See that?
That's correct.
Mhm.
2.
Two,
Right.
building 2.
Building 2, they've agreed that
South
or
elevation
staff
of
has
building
agreed
2.
that
So,
3.
so maybe ask a question here, there's a straw poll on building 3 on the north. Is everybody okay with it being all metal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, south of 2, what they propose, who's okay with it?
I'm
Yeah.
okay with it.
I'm okay with
Okay,
it.
that it's, but it's not all metal. It's,
It's just that.
there's that wrap, right?
Right,
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly, with the wrap.
Right.
With the
yeah.
wrap.
Okay, so that would have to be
With-
rewritten just a little bit. Other words, put a period at the end of the first one so that because it's okay. But then, we would say, basically, that they were a variance to have an all-metal siding on the south of, or it's gonna be the north of Building 3.
Well, that's
the one
down
you
at the
can't-
bottom.
Right, that's
We're
one
not
you
there,
can't-
we're trying to now
Yeah.
I'm confused.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's the very first one. And I'm saying the first part of it, we're okay with.
Oh,
Right, but I'm saying
But the way
further
they've
on
written
down.
it, they only are gonna allow 36% on the north of 3 and the south of 2. What we're saying is the north of 3 can be 100%.
That's right.
And the south can be, I don't know what the number is, it's got that wrap, but.
The south-
In other
It
words,
would
that
be
really,
100%
that
without the
we're giving them variance for
plus-
what they showed us.
So I
As
might,
presented.
I might be able to simplify
As
this. If you look at the first bullet point, and after the first comma, you just cross out the rest,
Yeah.
and then you go down to the denial variances, the first bullet point there, you would just be recommending approval of that first bullet point.
Yes.
Mhm.
Because that says special variance to allow 100% metal siding on south elevation of Building 2 and north of Building 3.
Do we want to do, I agree, but there's a wrap on 2 that goes
Yeah,
in
you just
about
get
a
that
little ways.
percentage.
So really, the south of 2 is not 100%. So I don't know if you want to be careful about that or not, but.
I always say, or as depicted in the drawings.
There you
I mean, we
go.
can calculate that, or they
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
provide us that number.
Yeah,
Or
so
we could just add-
we would approve that one, and,
Mhm.
We could just add like a comma saying with the exception of the wrap on the south side.
yeah, exception of the wrap. So you take the first one, you cross out after 5, and you go to the one you say deny, and you say on the 10% of this, not covered by the wrap or something like that. You guys can wordsmith it with it, you know what we mean.
Yeah,
So it sounds like we're pretty much in agreement on that. We can go to the next one.
improving them as proposed, they could probably make it.
And then at the one at the special variance, we would approve rather than deny.
Right.
I hate to be
We should have numbered these things.
I know, I hate to be a stickler.
That's what I was struggling with.
Actually, you don't. You are. a
No, well, I am.
That's-
But you brought it up now, but I'm here kind of in the middle of the page, where it starts a recommendation, and then it's the first bullet point, and your staff recommends the planning commission approve the following, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And it says type 2 adjustment to allow up to 36% metal siding on the south elevations of buildings 4 and 5.
Uh-huh.
The south elevation of building 2, where they're looking for more than 36.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's
that-
what
We're
we're-
crossing that
okay.
one
That
out.
comma would become a period, the rest of the sentence would go
We'll
away.
cross out those last two.
Right.
And somebody said on Saturday Night Live a long time ago, never
Never
mind.
mind. Thank you, Gilda.
We realize you've been on vacation for 2 months, and it's going to take you one meeting to get back in the game.
Okay, let's move on to the second bullet point, that would be number 2. Special variance to allow second right-out only driveway egress on Champion Way to be spaced less than 150 feet from the existing common
Right,
access.
that's, yeah, so does everybody know where that is?
Yep,
Yeah.
Yes.
fine, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
You okay
Me
with
too.
it?
My only thought on that was that when we say a right-out, is that going to be curbed that way, or just signed that way? I mean,
There's nowhere they can go except for.
is the gate right there?
Between the buildings, looks like.
The gate is
I
back
would
a
have
little.
to check, our public works director may have recommended a pork chop or something, I can't remember
Yeah.
if it's, I think it's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, if
That's
it's
my
gated, I
thought.
think it depends on how the gate functions. If you can't actuate the gate from the public right-of-way side, you can't
Right.
go in there.
Yeah, it's a
No, this
one-way.
is coming out, and it's right only.
Says
I want
right
to make
only.
sure that you
Well,
can
I mean,
only.
that's
sorry,
how
the
they're
right-
proposing
the right
it,
turn
so
movement.
that wasn't they're proposing a right out.
Yeah.
Right.
The little pork chop.
I
That
think
could
we
just
had
be
a
that
curve
could be a
right.
thing that says,
I think
it's like,
so.
it's like the, in front of Goodwill.
Yes, yes.
People are going in that all kinds of
Oh,
ways.
I don't want to be
Okay.
a stickler, but why does it have to be right out only?
It's too
There's
close to
nowhere to
the
go.
other one, I think, was the thought,
I
wasn't
think
it?
there was something about, there was some concern if you turned left out of there.
They proposed it as right out, so that's kind of what they're doing.
I don't know.
Okay.
You know
I
what,
mean, you could add some flexibility,
We would love
or
to have left out or right out.
you could add flexibility, or as otherwise approved by the traffic city traffic engineer.
There you go.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
And then that way they, let
That
them
makes
work with
sense.
the traffic engineer
Yeah.
to determine.
Yeah,
what a
I like
lot
that
is.
idea, because
Yeah.
it's only a two-lane road. I mean,
Right.
I don't see a real problem going
I don't
turning
see
left
the
out of it
evidence in the
personally.
record right now that shows it's a
So
problem.
it sounds like we're all okay with that one, right?
Yep.
With the change, as
Yeah.
approved by the traffic
Huh?
engineer.
Right now. Right now, it's not a problem, but then is that,
Yeah.
that's just gonna become more and
Yeah.
more.
More cars.
That's the reason for the, having the ingress egress split further apart, so.
Mhm.
Again, whoever said it with the traffic engineer, if they can work it out.
Must have
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and I
think we can
don't,
modify that condition.
I don't see it as a heavy load traffic.
It might be a one car every half an hour or 20 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah, if that,
Depends if it's a
Currently.
weekend, working day or not.
yeah.
Okay, the next one.
Okay, and this
Flat
one has to
roofs.
do with flat roofs. Is any concerns on that one?
No.
No.
My only concern is I didn't hear any
We'll leave it in.
reasons why the flat roof, other than they want a flat roof.
Okay.
I mean, nobody said
Well,
anything
I heard
about it. I mean, I
somebody's-
assume it's gonna be cheaper to build.
I heard somebody say to match at first.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
The what?
To match.
To match
the
building one,
building.
which would be flat.
And it
But-
also has less of a problem with visibility for the businesses.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
cinema's
It doesn't
problem.
matter. Yeah, I know.
I know.
Yeah.
My point is that there's some other things in I-1 that we have had flat roof issues on. It's industrial, so that's a standard drill. And, yeah, we haven't necessarily said it's okay. So, I mean, I would just, remember, we're supposed to show some rationale for each one of
Mhm.
these. And I still haven't seen any rationale, so. Other than cost, and cost generally we don't consider to be a deciding factor for a
Right.
approval. So. I
Other than that,
Good question.
Yeah, it is. makes
yeah.
sense.
I'm just, maybe the applicant can tell us why they want a
Yeah,
flat
we're
roof.
still,
That's
we're
all I
still
wanna know.
open if you can answer
The
that.
purpose of that was
You got-
for
you got
come up.
consistency.
You have to go
Come
to
on, come up to the
speaker.
microphone.
Yeah.
It goes
It's
better
not
on
for
the
us,
tape.
it's for the
sure.
TV
No, the
people.
purpose of that was visual consistency, since it's structurally necessary, or at least very advisable for building one. We thought it made a more coherent design for the entire property if all the buildings speak the same visual language. So if you have one, not quite flat, but you should shed roof, and the others are a completely different style and structural system, it would just look inconsistent. And we thought it would be more harmonious to present a consistent sort of repetition of buildings.
Okay.
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 Next one?
But since we're on the roof though for a second, one of maybe it was in here, one of you mentioned something about needing, maybe it was on the slide if Emily had, additional information on rooftop equipment. Is there
If
any,
they-
is there any
that was a
rooftop
condition.
equipment?
That's a
If
condition.
proposed, maybe.
I didn't think it was.
There
It's not a,
isn't
it's
any.
not a Burger King. Okay.
Yeah, there's not gonna be a hood then on top, I hope.
Right, so it sounds like
Okay.
number 3 we're okay with. We're
Yep.
doing number
Next one is
4.
to allow less than the required window coverage.
The north elevation of 1.
East of 1 and 2, south of 4 and 5, provided that the metal awnings and landscape trellises in the 2 proposed sections of metal siding of 4 and 5.
I think we went over that in the applicant,
Yeah.
they were all agreement,
Yep.
so I'm fine with that.
Yep.
It's been covered.
Okay, retaining wall greater than 6 feet, I think it was like 8.5 feet.
Yes.
And it's actually
Fine.
stepped also, so it's,
It doesn't
Um,
appear to be.
Just
yeah.
to make sure, I think the applicant made a comment that they haven't done all the final, grading, but it's a possibility that that interior, there's going to be one bigger than 6. I mean, I thought you mentioned
is
that.
2
There was
feet.
some uncertainty,
2 feet. The internal retaining wall.
was 2, but
It's
there's
2.
going to be no other, you don't see any other situations where there's going to be a retaining wall over 6 feet on the property other than the one you mentioned.
That's correct. That's
Okay, I thought I heard you say otherwise. So what I want to do is those to me are automatic variances. We can't change the site. If you need to do that, you do that.
We had
So
a
I just want to make
condition
sure
that
there
it
wasn't a hidden one that they got, oh shoot, we didn't get that, got to come back.
Yeah, and I think that's why Emily pointed out if there was, to bring it up tonight, so that they wouldn't have to come back for a hearing just for that one wall.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we have had that happen, as you guys know.
Yes.
I think we had that happen on the subdivision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, birds on you.
So
Okay,
then the last one is
Public
public
entrance.
entrance and connecting walkways on 235.
mhm,
Makes sense, it's a,
yeah,
for the use.
Given the
the
use,
nature of the
makes
use.
sense.
Then we would be approving special variance, first one, the next bullet.
With the caveat of with the exception of the wrap of building 2, as pointed out by Dawn.
Right.
Correct.
They would have like a 20-foot wrap.
Which,
Okay.
which would be kind of funny to say we're gonna allow 100% metal siding on south elevation of building 2, except it's gonna have a wrap of 20 feet. That's-
We'll word it good.
Okay,
I agree. It does sound funny.
okay,
Yeah,
That
we'll work
gets
with
us
that.
to the last
Make
two
sure
on the
it's
top
worded.
of page
We can get the
97.
percent.
Yeah.
all right, then we're down to another special variance on the allow less than required window percent coverage, but that's being addressed, or
Because they're going to.
they're going to add those windows. So that one goes away, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we still deny it.
It would still be a denial.
Oh, okay, I thought that was, all
And then we
right,
would just change the finding, or we would add to the finding that you denied the variance, but that the applicant has agreed, and it's gonna be conditioned that they
Okay.
put the window coverage.
all right. I think we're there.
No, there's
no,
two.
not
there's
quite.
two at the top
Oh,
of the next
okay.
page there.
Next page.
These are the ones that staff came up with.
All right, yeah, now we're down to building.
I mean, yeah, with the development of this size, what ends up happening, as you guys probably are aware of, is when you do the completeness check, you don't find every single thing that, yeah. So we found these, Emily found these later on when she was doing a more thorough review.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
understand.
Yep.
Okay, so is to approve or deny, or that they've asked for a special variance to allow less than 50% of the street frontage along Industrial Way to be comprised of buildings with 20 feet, within 20 feet. So that's that issue of building 4.
Or kind of slightly
That
angled.
Tilted building,
4 and 5,
4 and
yeah.
5.
4 and 5, okay.
And if you were to approve it, the only suggestion was to kind of beef up the landscaping in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Druthers
So
on
we
that
need to
one?
put something down
Approve that one?
on that, or is that, will that be in one of your
think it's in the-
recommendations?
If we approve it, they'll
They'll
draft
get
it.
it?
They'll get the
Okay.
words.
Yeah, we'll add some additional language to that one.
And then
about
the
it.
last one is the civic space area.
Right. Any concerns there?
It seemed appropriate given the use.
Okay.
Doesn't want to hang out at the mini store.
Yeah, I think 1,700 square feet would,
Hang out outside.
Seems excessive.
A
a
little
little
park in the
excessive
middle
at
of
a storage facility.
Okay, well, Spencer, I was holding out to see if you'd catch that we hadn't closed it yet, so,
Well, then we don't need it, we're
Don't
in
need to yet.
discussion.
We're still in discussion.
I know, but we have to close the public hearing.
Yeah, well,
I move we close
You-
the public hearing.
do we want to,
Then we have the motion.
seriously, there's a bunch of recommendations here. Do we want to glance through those and keep it
Well, we can
open?
do that. I don't think we need the.
Okay. Ronnie suggested we close it.
Yeah.
Johnny second.
Moved and second to close public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're on our own now. Flying solo.
So we kind of well have agreed on all the variants. It really boils down to these some odd 64. Anybody got any concerns on any of those 64 recommendations?
No.
Or does the applicant
The
have any
conditions, no.
questions?
No.
We closed it, so I can't ask them.
Yeah, the applicant didn't. I didn't see anything. We pulled out a lot of them are boilerplate things that are just
Some of them are
standard.
duplicates of the variant stuff. Some of them,
Right.
you know, are not there, but nothing jumped out to me other than, Mr. Brown in his note had made note of 50 and 53, and I don't know if you've ever conditioned 50 before. The applicant has a licensed pest control, evaluate the site, determine if the pest eradication is needed.
Yeah,
That's before we even start.
Yeah.
We've conditioned that the last 2 years on every application where
Yeah.
there's earth removal.
There's a beaver family living there.
Is there?
Is it really?
Proof, positive.
I mean, like on every
Oh.
residential subdivision, we stuck that in there.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We were getting a lot of complaints when they were like, grading, that there'd be like a whole bunch of rats and stuff going onto other properties. I don't know, we were getting a lot of complaints about it for a while.
Okay.
Well, if there's no concerns on the conditions listed there, and we've gone through the variance and special variance requests.
The only thing I would just want to clarify, because Tracy brought it up, is that the applicant has any concerns on this 3,000 Kelvin thing.
We can't ask them.
We can't ask
Well, they can just nod their head, or, you know, and we'll just take that as a formal
Yeah.
advice.
I mean, I think they would have brought it up typically if they had
Yeah.
concern with it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'm ready
Okay.
to make a motion. I move we go home.
I move we accept file number 18-047, DRVR ADG Sandy Vault Storage, as presented with the staff recommendations and the changes noted in this discussion.
Second,
So,
I did.
Hold up,
Gotta
hold
go
on.
in.
I'm just, so it's a, I'm just gonna restate the motion
Please.
to approve the application, 18-047 with the modifications discussed by the commission and direction to staff to make those adjustments.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is, that was moved, and wasn't it second? Don?
Don.
Seconded? Okay, roll call, vote.
Commissioner Carlton,
Yes.
Commissioner Lasowski,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Logan,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Chairman Crosby.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you all.
That wasn't too painful.
Okay, I don't think, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, actually, I did want to introduce Chris. Is it Chris Mayton?
Yes.
Do you want to come up and just say a few words? I think council went through a selection process, and I think, Jerry, you were a part of that.
Uh-huh.
And I think Mr. Mayton will be, I think on April 1st at City Council.
April 1st.
Yeah.
Will be appointed, I guess. So my name is Chris Mayton, and I've been a Sandy resident since 2006. I've been in the private sector in retail as executive vice president for Pep Boys and for Bridgestone tires for global companies. Pep Boys recently sold. I was let go, so I came.
So you're looking for employment here?
I found some. I now work for the state. I'm the director of purchasing and distribution for the Oregon Liquor Control Commission.
Oh.
And I started there about a year and a half ago. So coming to work for the state, I found myself with a lot of free time. I'm not traveling as much anymore. So I've been looking in my backyard and saying, what can I do differently? And
Don't
me and my
forget
wife
your-
talked and said, I want
You're,
to do something in the
Oh,
city.
he's
You're
bored.
bored.
So here I am, and I was asked. I met with Jerry a couple times. I was fortunate enough to meet the mayor, and he, I guess, the council recommended me. So I'm looking forward to joining and adding a different perspective. I've been here 13 years, so not my entire life. I grew up in Chicago, but I spent 8 years in the Navy. I've traveled the world, and I've fought in a couple of wars. But I've done a great deal of service for other companies, and I want to do something for my community. And I'm hoping to have a good perspective to this council. So,
Okay,
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
we will see you next month.
you guys do this long every night or every time?
No.
No.
Sometimes.
This was shorter than estimated, I
I
would say.
estimated
Yeah.
11
I thought
o'clock.
it would be much.
Yeah.
The only other things I'd like to add is just to remind everybody, we have that April 8th continuance. So if you attended, and this is for Chris as well, if you'd like to attend it, if you would like to attend that meeting, and you didn't attend the February 27th or whatever it was?
25th, February 25th.
February 25th, thank you. You would really need to kind of, as advised by Mr. Guzman at the previous meeting, you'd really need to probably watch the video and really come up to speed on what occurred at the last meeting so that you can feel comfortable in making a decision and being part of the motion on April 8th. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, I would just recommend probably either sitting in the audience or not participating on the dais that night. And then on April 22nd, we're going to have a hearing regarding Dutch Brothers, which is going in just west of 7-Eleven, or that's where they're proposing to go in.
West, okay.
So are they asking for a variance for a drive-through in C1?
Conditional use permit.
But
And,
is the drive-through a part of the deal?
Yeah,
You know, in C1?
yeah. So that will be coming on April 22nd. And then we are gonna have several other ones. I think we're gonna have probably one in May, or maybe two, like tonight in May, potentially for Fun Time RV's expansion, and then also for the PG Line Center. They purchased the site at the southeast corner of Industrial and 362nd, where Always Towing was for a while. And so they purchased it from the landholder that was in Madras, and they're moving forward with putting a line center there.
A what?
A line center, like where they store their vehicles
yeah,
and
yeah,
store
sure.
some utility
Got it.
poles and stuff like that.
And that's at 362nd and,
362nd and Industrial.
Right across from the old bus barn.
Correct.
Right.
Right next to the new bus
yeah.
barn.
North of.
oh, the place that used to be the bus barn.
Maybe it was at one point, I don't know.
Well, that was Carlson before that, wasn't it? Carlson?
It was
Yeah.
Always Towing is the only thing I think before
Yeah.
Always Towing, when I worked here, it was just I think a vacant building
Yeah,
for a
it was
while.
empty.
No, Carlson had
Carlson
it,
was in
and
there
then
a
they
little bit.
moved their detailing place
Oh,
out,
okay.
and then the prior vendor with the school district first student, I think, had that. And when we had a hearing on it, everything, they had to pave it and all the rest. And
Oh,
then-
that's to the west. This is on the other side of the road.
It's on the east side of
This is on the east side of the road.
North of the new bus yard.
So, and other than that, I don't know, we have a lot
That
of
big
projects.
building that's there, huh? Is that gonna come down
Mhm.
over there?
And you'll just send us out a list of where it's already posted.
Yeah, I'll just send out, I'll let you guys know
It's
as we
the
know the
8th
meeting
and the
dates.
22nd in
The
April.
one I did want to bring up, so we have the two meeting dates for April already set. It will be the 8th and the 22nd. The May date, I did want to bring that up just for a few minutes tonight and just get
I
a
have
kind of
it
consensus. It is the day after, so Memorial Day is the fourth Monday of that month.
27th.
So we could either do it that Tuesday, the 28th, or if we can't make a quorum, we could do it on a different day in that month.
I have it down on Tuesday, so did we already talk about this?
No, I have
Hold
it
on.
on the.
I think you and I talked about this, Jerry.
Oh, okay, okay,
Well, I'd suggest you the 28th if you guys can do it.
yeah,
Okay,
28th works for me.
So first of all, April is the 8th.
And 22nd.
And 22nd. And May would be the day after Memorial Day if people can make that work.
Yep.
What's the agenda
Hold
item
on.
on the 8th?
You're going too fast.
Well, the
Okay.
continuous.
Jacoby Heights.
And then the
Yeah, yeah,
May one is
okay.
what?
Not yet.
28th.
So when does the next subdivision come up?
Day after Memorial Day.
April 8th, the continuance.
Well, after that one.
I got it down
That's
already.
Dutch.
That's Dutch.
I don't think we have any other ones in the hopper right now.
Okay.
We have a few apartments that are sitting out there that I anticipate will be submitted to us soon. And we have at least one subdivision, as we were talking, it's that big one off of Ponder Lane. It might be submitted in the summer sometime.
We also have the one off Jewelberry on the east side, potentially coming.
Oh, right, yep, you're right.
But it hasn't come in yet, so.
Yeah, not a lot of subdivisions. I mean, we're kind of thankful that the subdivision craze has slowed down for the moment.
Do you want me to brief everybody on what was decided kind of on last night? Or you had the presentation on the tree retention, just to summarize what.
Yeah, I could really quickly. Basically, we met in February with our newly formed tree committee, which Hollis is on. And we basically discussed some different things and had some questions. And then we brought those questions to council last night. They talked about some of the questions, so they gave us some answers, but I think they gave us kind of a clear direction of where we're going to be moving with that. And it is to have a balanced code, and they don't want to have clear cuts. And they are excited about the potential for tracks or some other form of clusters of trees, although, as everybody's aware, there's some problems with that too. So they did give us some direction, and then we're going to be meeting, we're trying to solidify the date in April that we're going to be meeting with the Tree Code Committee. And then the goal is going to be that council hopefully can adopt new code regulations for 17102, 1760, and 1792. So landscaping, FSH, and urban forestry all in September. And that, so if we do meet that goal, that would mean it's probably going to come back before you as a board, as a commission, probably in July or August.
Mhm.
Probably August, but.
Probably August. after we have time to notice the LCD and kind of get all.
Yeah, I mean, I rabble-roused at the last meeting about it, because I didn't know all the details you had, because that was my only concern, is, set a deadline and it'll get done, because, we want to solve it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think giving a realistic deadline, and if it doesn't happen until October, it doesn't, but we are gonna try to get it done by September, is what our goal is gonna be.
Good.
I had about 3 quick questions. Any idea on the Tractor Supply Company, is it?
Moving forward, Emily's reviewing the building plans. And as I think I've shared with a few of you outside the meetings, is the only reason they held up is because they're trying to coincide with doing the new one in Malala at the same time. And they were running into a lot of issues with ODOT in Malala, so.
They're not waiting on Sandy from Malala, are they?
Yeah, they really are. They're timing them so that they can have construction crews and people from Alabama all out at the same time for the 2 projects.
That's my 9 o'clock.
Well, we should have conditioned that they have to hire Oregon labor, I guess.
Well, I think they are. Yeah.
Second one was, I got mine, I'll get it done tomorrow, but the ethics form from the state email came out.
Oh,
that's right.
Yeah.
I got mine done.
Yeah, so
that's their
It's their character.
that might be
They're
due
a
for
city
you,
recorder
Todd.
now.
Well, I think it's automatically.
Well, it
Yeah,
came
you
to
gotta
me, and,
handle it yourself.
yeah, I mean, it's easy to do now, because if you had last year's, you just kind of go in and
Yeah.
zip along, but I don't know if you've done that or not.
5
I
minutes,
haven't
maybe.
yet.
Have you get an email from the
Yeah.
state?
Yeah.
So we just got to dismiss.
Well, after you fill this one out, be sure you print a copy, because you'll need it next year.
Well, mine was
Well-
Heck,
all,
I didn't even have to
I
bug
didn't
you.
have to print it, it was all my
Yeah.
responses from last year were
Yeah.
already there.
It's easy.
Just dismiss the appeal.
The other, Kelly, the only other suggestion or thought I had was, we've had a new city manager now for a while, but to my knowledge, he hasn't come to a PC meeting yet to introduce himself and talk, and just let us know who the person is.
Probably, yeah, Jordan Wheeler. He used to be the deputy city manager in Lake Oswego.
Yeah, I just didn't know if he was gonna come.
My guess is with the rigorous meeting schedule council's had him on, my guess is you probably won't see him for a little while. I will try to get him to come to one, but, they're having him go to 4 or 5 meetings a month right now.
We'll give him lots of chances, in the
Yeah.
next month or so.
Yeah, my guess would be you might be able to see him in May or June, but my guess is he's probably not gonna be able to make one before that.
My only other comment was that the last meeting, this thing doesn't display.
Yeah, it broke last night again.
Yeah.
They had it fixed and then it broke on Jeremy last night during the meeting.
I think there's discrimination over on our side, Ron.
I have a request for we used to have didn't you used to have a digital laser?
Yeah, projection
thing?
screen.
We need to get that again.
Yeah, they got rid of that.
Well, but
No,
a laser,
just
But you
the
can't,
just
the laser
get a
doesn't bounce
laser.
off of TVs.
Yeah.
it doesn't, you can't point at something?
It doesn't bounce off, laser will not bounce off a TV. It's not a solid surface like a wall.
Oh, really?
Or a wooden pointer.
There you go.
That
You
would
could have a
be
long
fine.
pointer or something.
Black rubber tip.
Yeah, there you go.
Or if they had
Yes,
control of it, they could use their mouse
Okay.
to point at something.
Somebody have the honors?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any dare oppose?
Thank you, staff, for all the hard work.
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys are up.
You know,